I think he would have cleaned it up with all those eyes out there. I saw it. I didn't like it.
Okay, it being 7 o'clock, we're going to call to order this meeting of the Chelmsford Planning Board on March 27th. This will be held live as well as on Zoom, but should the Zoom go down, we will continue the meeting. We will start tonight with public input. Public input to be limited to statements relating to issues within the jurisdiction of the planning board that are not currently the subject of a pending public hearing before the board. Public comment on any pending public hearing will only be heard during such public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in the public?
We talked to this guy.
Please step to the microphone, state your name and address.
John Harris. I live in 6 Subway Ave. I've been here since 1996, and I brought 3 young boys with me, and the subway road was bad as far as people coming down and speeding and whatnot, and we've tried to talk the town and everything at least to, doing something about it, and really it's just gotten a lot worse. I see school buses, I see these delivery trucks, and they're going 30 to 40 miles an hour. On Subway Ave, there is no double yellow lines. There are no sidewalks. You have people with young children on that road, and it is a very popular road for either walking or walking their dogs, pets, okay? And you got people doing 30 to 40 miles an hour.
Okay.
It's zoned right now for 25, and that still is way too much.
So,
My proposal,
sir, we are not in jurisdiction of traffic and speeding and even sidewalks.
they asked me to get up and state my case,
No.
so here I am.
He did come up and ask us if
Yeah,
he should.
we just said-
We told him select board is probably where he needs
Or
to.
sidewalk and pedestrian, or, we don't have any jurisdiction.
Well, maybe you'll understand my concern and back me up.
I totally understand your concern. I used to live on Sunset, but it's not in the jurisdiction of this committee.
Fine, well, I've got it out there, and I'll be back.
Thank you, sir. Am I incorrect?
No,
No, but-
select
but
board's
these-
probably who should.
Yeah, they're the people that can do something about it.
Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to
Oh,
speak?
yeah. Ed
Okay.
Duffin, 270 Princeton Street, right across the street from the disaster that's happening right now. This never should have happened. This town should have bought that property
Is
for later on development, senior citizen or whatever. They passed it up. They did not buy the property, and we got a disaster going there right now. I don't know why all of a sudden we have property in this side of town that's perfectly all right back in December to buy it for almost twice the price. I don't know who has an answer to that. Why can we buy a farm here, but we couldn't have bought a property over there that could have been used for, I had recommended for senior citizen housing, disabled veterans. The people don't listen in this town. I don't care who's sitting on these chairs up there. You don't listen to the people. You have your own agenda, and that's it. Now, I'll go as far as that. Town sewerage. I thought we were restricted to tie-ins for town sewerage. Is that correct?
We have restrictions on our town sewage, that's correct.
I thought we had a block when the Glenview project went in, that they had to fight and cut back.
Are you talking about the UMass project?
No, I don't care about UMass. They have their own system. I'm talking about, how come there's still so much other stuff being built if there's a sewerage limit that they can't tie into the town? Now, we have,
There's certain parameters by which they can tie in. Those are determined between the DPW and the sewer department and the proponents of plans. And they have to meet certain restrictions based on the previous use of a property and how much sewer was used by them and how much they can purchase.
what about on Walter Weed Street? There's 4 townhouses. How did they
I
determine?
believe they were permitted before.
Madam Chair, can I jump in, please?
Please.
I just want to remind the board that it should not engage in back-and-forth discussions during public input. These are matters that are not listed on
Okay,
your
thank you.
agenda. You're at risk of backing into an open meeting law violation.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anytime you hear any information during a public input that you think is something that does need a discussion from the board, it should be put on a future agenda and discussed at
Okay.
that time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm causing problems here, but that's just the way it is. Overlay section. Can I talk about the overlay section here? Because it's for West Campus. So we have an overlay that includes where they're building, and they're going to include 2 condominium projects. Can whoever does this, I assume it's a bunch of people down at Beacon Hill, whoever sets up these overlays, do you know who sets the overlays up?
So, wait a minute, are you talking
We're-
about, this is the
We,
MBTA,
we're,
that's the,
we're not
answer.
responding.
We
You
can't.
But that's
can
the
ask,
next-
we can't answer you.
Okay.
You can tell us what your concerns
on the
are,
next
and we can
agenda item.
consider them.
So
That's
next
on the
agenda
agenda
item is
item.
the
On the-
MBTA.
Like, dead
The
end.
next agenda item, we're going to be presenting about the MBTA, and so you can,
ask about
you
that
can
then.
ask about
There'll be
that
a
then,
public input on that.
or you can watch the presentation and learn the answers to some of the questions.
Oh, I get more questions. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in open public session? Okay, seeing no one. Next up, we have administrative review, of which there is none. And then we'll discuss the MBTA Community Multifamily Overlay District. 2 overlay districts are proposed. One is located in the UMass West area, including properties with parcel ID, I'm not going to read it. The purpose of this overlay is to allow multifamily housing as of right in accordance with Section 3A of the Zoning Act, Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A. So we have another draft of our FAQs. We also have an email from the town manager.
It's actually from town council,
We,
different Paul.
oh, well, there was one from Paul. Anyway. So why don't we start with the FAQs? Has everyone had a chance to look through the most updated draft? Or would you
So-
like to proceed with
Yeah,
giving it
so
again?
if people are okay with those edits, I can clean it up and use it in the next presentation tomorrow. And assuming we get more more questions from people that warrant an addition to the FAQs, I can keep adding up until a few days before town meeting.
Great. It's looking good.
Yeah, I thought it looked good too.
For the board, Kelly and Mike from NIMCOG are here.
Oh, great.
Obviously, Paul Haverty, Town Council, is here as well. In your posted agenda, NIMCOG has at least one document, and the email that's referenced is an email from Town Council. And these speak directly to HLC's signed compliance review letter. So I don't know to what extent the board wants to hear from NIMCOG on that, or if you have questions. I don't know how much time you want to spend.
Before we get to that, I just have a question on the town meeting warrant document that's linked in there. Does that include the edit, does it only include the edits from our last meeting, or does it include all of the suggested edits?
All.
All of them? Okay. So last meeting plus any of the ones suggested from tonight's discussion?
It includes everything from last meeting that
Okay.
was discussed and agreed upon.
But what about the edits suggested in NIMCOG's,
It is
not those?
correct.
You have
Okay.
to discuss those.
I just wanted
If-
to make sure that,
If the board, if per NIMCOG's memo, if the board is interested in hearing and learning more and considering additional amendments,
Okay.
that conversation would take place tonight.
I would like, I
The
think we
other-
would like
the
to
other
learn more
option
about
that
those.
is- That
those
council has
recommendations.
suggested is not modifying the zoning and modifying something else.
okay.
Right. So we have before us kind of a fork in the road, modify the development agreement or,
Can we just, maybe it'd be best if we state what the issue is that came back from.
okay, yeah,
Start from there, maybe we can summarize the issue.
So why don't we have either Kelly or Mike want
That'd be
to
great.
summarize the memo on that particular issue?
Sure. I'm happy to do so, or Mike, please feel free to jump in if I miss anything.
Sure.
Okay. Kelly Linema, Deputy Director of Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. Good evening, everyone. So in HLC's final comment letter regarding the draft zoning that was submitted for 90-day review, in our prior meeting, we had discussed the email comments that they had submitted, but then since that time, they have since submitted a separate letter, which includes this additional clause regarding HLC's concern about the UMass multifamily district, the development agreement that is placed upon that. And so Mike Ashola, our Senior Planner of Housing and Land Use, received a copy of the development agreement and then reviewed that development agreement to understand where it may be in conflict with the zoning. Mm-hmm. This memo outlines areas where the development agreement is in conflict with the zoning, and I think that falls into three broad categories. One is because there are areas where the development agreement limits the capacity beyond the capacity that is required under Section 3A. Mm-hmm. Two is areas where the development agreement puts restrictions on who can live in the housing that is in conflict with Section 3A, which is, I would say, is separate from a developer saying that they want to do something. This is the development agreement presents a restriction mm-hmm. that is sort of perpetual with the land. Mm-hmm. And the third is where the development agreement requires a level of affordability that exceeds the 10% maximum for inclusionary zoning as set forth under the guidelines for Section 3A. Mm-hmm. With those three things in mind, I think the board, what this memo outlines are areas where the board may need to make a decision between whether to amend the zoning, the draft zoning, or to make a recommendation to, I believe the select board owns the development agreement, but may need to make a recommendation to the select board to amend the development agreement so that the zoning that is brought before town meeting may be considered by the HLC as compliant. Mm-hmm. Because right now the development agreement as it stands would mean that the zoning is not in compliant because the development agreement puts additional restrictions on that parcel beyond what would be compliant with Section 3A. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So what's the recommendation on the zoning? How to change that?
It's in the memo that's on the screen here. There's potential actions to achieve compliance that NIMCOG has articulated for each of the three challenges.
So I would say the first regarding capacity issues. Yep. You could either amend the development agreement to remove the limit on unit capacity. Under that situation, if the zoning is approved by town meeting, then the new development capacity would be what complies with Section 3A and what was included in our model. Or you could amend the density requirements in other subdistricts to compensate for the insufficient density. So you could increase the dwelling unit per acre ratio in any of the other, or in the, I believe it's at the Route 110 subdistrict.
In that delta, I believe is 77 units.
77, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were to do adjust the density in the Route 110 subdistrict, mm-hmm. That would require going up to how many units per acre in that subdistrict? An additional 2 per acre, is that right?
Mike, do you know the answer to that question?
I believe it was at least 2 per acre.
Did they not look at our agreement when we forwarded it?
This came in after the 90-day response period. Am I not correct?
Yeah.
Can I ask just some very fundamental questions above this? As I understand it, that agreement predates the requirement for us to be passing something under the MBTA zoning. Is that correct? I mean, this smells so ex post facto. Our obligation, as I understood it, was to pass zoning that would comply with the MBTA statute, not to pass zoning that would guarantee that something would get built. I'm confused here. Can perhaps town council explain to me why the state here even has a leg to stand on?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier for the
Yeah,
record.
we know, yeah.
Paul Haverty, Town Council. All I can say is that prior to the adoption of the West Campus zoning, I actually had a conversation with Chris Clutchman from then DHCD, now EOHLC, expressed what the town was looking to do, because when the West Campus development was approved, it was done with the intention of it ultimately complying with the MBTA community's requirements. I asked specifically if having a development agreement would impact the ability for us to actually, be in compliance. She could not give me a definitive answer at that time. She basically hemmed and hawed and said that they weren't far enough into the process to really have looked at that question. She did tell me that she would get back to me, which she never did. However, I do think that they have a leg to stand on in the sense that it doesn't matter whether or not the development agreement was adopted a year before the MBTA communities went into effect, whether it was 10 years before, whether it was 50 years before. If there is a development agreement on the property that limits the development on that property, EOHLC is taking the position that that is then not compliant with the statute.
So how would this apply to private property and private rights on some of the other properties involved here? I mean, we're talking about a document, an agreement that was done by the town as one party. But we've had a whole bunch of people come before this board say, oh, they're going to take my rights away, and we've said no, no, no. Can the state or can't they?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that question. I mean, I think that if you're talking about easement rights, and then there's a question as to whether or not that's a recorded easement, a record easement, or whether it's a prescriptive easement. I don't think that EOHLC is going to get that deep into the weeds on those questions.
Well, I
Seems
sure
pretty
hope
deep in the
not, but this
weeds.
implies that they could.
I think that when you're talking about a development agreement that has been executed between a developer and a municipality, that's probably a different level
It's sui generis, so to
Then-
speak, yeah.
a private agreement between two private parties. I think they're looking at this as municipalities trying to do an end around the
Which
requirements
is
of the
exactly what every municipality is trying to do.
statute. Correct. And they're trying to prevent that.
Yeah,
At the last hour.
at the last hour. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Evan and I had a discussion, just before the meeting started. It would have been better if they had actually addressed this in the regulations. The question, as I stated, was brought to them
Yeah.
prior to the adoption
Yeah.
of the regulations.
And they
And
could
if
do
they
that.
had a concern, it should have been addressed in the regulations, but it wasn't. And now they are, basically seeking to identify these, on an ad hoc basis. And
So-
they're going to catch some and miss others.
Yeah.
So my understanding was that at the very beginning of this process, when we were in negotiation with the developer, we had requested that this, I thought it was the development agreement, be sent to them to see if they felt it would be compliant, or it would be,
The
then
development
we were
agreement
told
itself
yes.
was not sent to them, but I did describe the relevant portions to Chris Clutchman.
So what was
from
sent to them?
DHCD.
What you're referring to was Section 5, which is what the UMass West Multifamily Overlay District references, right? Section 5, which was simply the state's by right provision.
Right, so
So
basically
that
it was
process
the
required-
zoning that was passed.
And that the state's process required or offered towns to submit the sites for the state to determine whether the site was eligible, whether it met the standards to be considered for Section 5 by right. So that's what the UMass West process was about. As town council mentioned, when we were going through the UMass West process, Section 3A, which is MBTA zoning, didn't exist.
But it was in the process of being
No,
it, and we
it did
were.
exist.
They didn't have the-
The
they
just
statute had
had
already
not
been
blocked
passed,
down
the
the
regulations
right,
had
didn't
not
have
been
any detail.
passed. Right.
Okay.
So what do you recommend, Paul? What would you do?
So my recommendation would be to try to find a way to add those 77 units into another district so that you do not have to change the development agreement to eliminate the total number of unit restriction, because that was something that all of the abutting property owners, got behind. And it was a major reason why there was support for the adoption of that zoning at the time it passed. And I don't think that it would be wise to revise that portion of the development agreement.
Or fair.
Furthermore, I don't think we can.
We can.
We unilaterally, we
No,
can
not
change it.
unilaterally,
You're right.
but
They have to get
I
somebody to
don't think
agree.
that we would have difficulty getting the developer to agree to assist the town. in-
I don't know if we would or not, but we
I
certainly.
think we're going to have to likely as it relates to the over 55 restriction and the affordability restriction, both of which have been brought up by EOHLC as well as being concerns.
So what are we at, 13% affordability on that project, if I remember correctly? It wasn't,
I think it was
12 or 15.
all right.
It's 54 units and 6, so a total of
Plus 6.
60.
So, but I
So we
thought
gotta
we,
drop that down to 10 is what we're saying?
so, but wait a minute, I thought we put in the request for us to go up to 15%.
We did.
We still need to do the economic feasibility analysis.
Are we doing that already?
We do not have funding in place for that right now.
When do we think we might have that?
We're either going to re-engage with NIMCOG, or we're going
When
to
are we
have
gonna
to
do
seek.
that? I thought that was ongoing.
Well, it has not commenced. It has not commenced.
But I mean, I don't see any risk in eliminating the affordability restriction and in eliminating the age restriction, because the Choice project, it's subject to contracts between those private parties. That project is moving forward as approved. So even without the requirements in the development agreement, they will still be able to construct an age-restricted, affordable development on that property. It's just that we can't have a development agreement that prohibits them from doing it.
So,
If you-
and everything's, the permits have been pulled, right? And they've started,
The Trimble
Are we-
Crow has pulled their building permits for all of their units, 350 units. It's fully financed. They're actively constructing.
okay, so that's not gonna
Yeah, they're
change.
not gonna change.
Exactly.
Okay,
And Choice is locked in as well.
All right.
The wastewater treatment plant's been approved by DEP. They have MEPA approval.
okay, all right.
The one thing is, and this was discussed multiple times with this board, with the select board, as it was executed, the development agreement ran with the land. The property owner signed off on it as well as the developer. So eliminating these requirements eliminates it from running with the land as well, because once the requirement's gone, there's nothing to run with the land. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration,
Did we,
which is why I don't think eliminating, the number of units restriction is a wise choice.
right,
Right.
did we, I can't recall, did we specify or stipulate that the age-restricted housing would, and the affordability housing would be maintained in perpetuity?
Mhm.
Okay. So then we don't really have to worry about that, correct?
Once they execute a regulatory agreement, which we're close to getting executed, it's in the final stages, correct. Then it's affordable in perpetuity.
Okay. When do we think that's gonna happen?
The state indicated within 2 to 3 months is the review
And when was that?
today.
Today?
Well, the select board voted on Monday to
Yeah.
sign and submit it to the state.
What's the likelihood of the state changing their minds on that one, too?
It's their form document.
Okay.
There shouldn't be any pushback whatsoever. It's just a fill-in-the-blanks document.
What's the next step?
Well, I brought up the slide for 110. So if we have to add 77 units, is that based upon, it's at 17, it's at 17 units per acre developable density, but do you do the math based upon the developable acreage? 28.1?
That's pretty dense.
NIMCOG?
That's
Is
question.
that-
Yeah, I just ran it through the compliance model for that sub-district. If it went to 18 units per acre, it would yield an additional 105. 17 yields an additional 63.
63?
So
Can you do
Yep, so it would have to be
17.5.
more.
17.2?
17 and a half, can we do that?
17.2? What's 17.2? Not give them anything.
And with that modification, within the zoning bylaw, where would that modification be inserted? If that is the only modification necessary? Because currently we treat
That
both overlays districts the same.
Yes, so we would need to specify a different sub-district under 195-171, density and dimensional requirements.
Okay, so table B would be modified to show.
Not table B, it would be,
Oh, right there, one, yep,
subsection A, and we would have to have an additional,
sentence.
we would need to amend 1 in order to specify the sub-district that would have a density of 15 dwelling units per acre.
Okay,
And then we would need to add a second that would specify a maximum density of 18 dwelling units per acre for the other sub-district.
and that's the only modification that would be necessary for the zoning overlay?
Let me just take a quick look at our memo again.
I'm sorry, can I back up? Are we talking about subdividing the 110 into one portion that's 18 and
No,
one
the
portion
entire,
that's
the entire
17?
110 district would allow up to 18 per acre.
The reason why it's different is
Yeah.
because we had the same density across both.
No, I get that. I just was
Now
trying
it's
to
gonna
be
two
extra
different
cute
densities.
and maybe get to 77 directly by subdividing the 110 into part 18 and part 17.
Come in right at the number.
Or closer than, what was it again?
Is there some-
Mike,
is there some-
for 18 units per acre, it was
Yeah, it was 105,
105, and for 17, it was 67?
63.
63. So we're still short 12.
I think it's actually a little bit more. I think we need to make up 120.
Number's growing. We're back to UPS.
Why?
No, I'm kidding.
Good.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
The compliance model
restriction-
capacity, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry. The restriction that's on the property is a difference of 120 units. So if we just use that figure for that parcel as it's capped,
Well, we currently
the
have,
only
But you are over the total
We're
number
over
of
the
units
number.
currently, right?
we had 1520, we only required 1477. So
Okay.
the delta that we
Yep.
need is
So
77.
the required capacity.
But yeah, but didn't the 1520 take into consideration that space, the UMass West?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, where there's very little wiggle room with capacity. I've seen it kind of come back a couple of times where there's been a little bit more review of especially larger parcels in districts for other communities. So if there's a little bit of a buffer and it's not right up at the capacity, it tends to help the situation.
But if we need 77 and we get 105, that would give that buffer, right?
That's at 18?
Yeah.
Or is that
Yes.
not enough of a buffer?
no, that would be enough of a buffer.
And so then would you reduce the density on the west campus to 15?
It already is.
It already is.
But it's already in that, then why is there an issue? Oh, because we're less than 15 because of the development agreement, okay.
So we wouldn't
We're
have
at
to
like
adjust
13,
the
I think it is.
developer agreement, right?
No.
And the state doesn't require that the UMass West District be revised. They're okay, the regulations allow for the other district to be revised to allow for increased capacity.
To offset a slight under.
I understand what we're doing, but is that allowed by the regulation in light of the development agreement? The development agreement is,
I don't think you clearly
is
framed
parcel
that as a
specific.
question. I thought you were stating it as a fact. And
no, it's a question. Development agreement is parcel specific,
Right.
and they've flagged that, but it's not clear to me. What the board is talking about is correcting the deficiency by increasing the unit capacity on this other district. And I don't know to what extent that actually is going to resolve HLC's concern.
Yeah, and we note that on page 2 of our memo, that adjusting the density requirement in the other sub-district to compensate for insufficient density would be something that we would recommend reviewing with HLC.
Okay.
Particularly because that inflated sub-district density would be in a district where the density is unlikely to be developed ever as housing.
But that was the case on the UMass site as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. That's the case in that's their whole
Because
strategy.
Every town's doing the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not every town is doing the same thing.
Enough where it's getting flagged.
Enough of them.
So what if we had the density go up slightly in the same subunit, but the other part of the subunit? So the Windermere, so if they went up to 18
Yeah.
or 17. would
Well,
that-
I think the issue with that is we run into the wellhead issue that we had discussed earlier.
I'm sorry?
I don't know, Mike, do you have a better answer to this?
I think it's still the same issue where you're inflating districts. You're kind of artificially inflating the districts to compensate for a shortfall in another, and that's something that EOHLC has been clear about all along, that they weren't going to allow that kind of manipulation.
I think the main issue here is that we can't answer whether that would satisfy HLC. So because it has already been stated by this board that the intent of putting the districts in these places is that there are locations where housing is unlikely to be produced, further inflating further inflating the density in those districts, which already have been acknowledged by the board as unlikely to produce housing, is possibly a strategy that HLC would not consider as compliant.
So with that context, if the board wants to move this forward to Springtown meeting, HLC's indicated that the compliance model and the bylaw are fine as long as the development agreement is revised. So I think you're left with, if you continue with the two districts, what I'm hearing is that HLC is likely to flag a new issue where you're artificially increasing capacity where you already know that even at 15 units an acre, it's unlikely. That does not seem like a viable option. The only viable option that's identified is the one right now of either amending the development agreement or we're going back to the drawing board.
But amending the development agreement is also artificially inflating because additional development's unlikely to occur there as well.
I'm just talking within the context of resolving an issue that HLC has identified.
If you adjust the developer agreement, doesn't that have to go in front of town meeting?
No, it's select board only.
Okay.
And I think we've already articulated this evening, that exercise is not much different than this whole MBTA zoning exercise. It's a paper exercise. For all intents and purposes, the notion that Trammell Crow and Choice are going to modify their project at this point seems slim to none.
There's a chance, though.
It won't be Trammell Crow.
In a developer world, you're gonna give them more units, there's a chance.
They already have funding. They already have permits.
I don't think it'll be Trammell Crow.
I just think that went in front of town meeting.
I understand, and that's, I
Everybody,
think
I
that's the
think to change
sensitivity that
is
town
something we shouldn't
council's
touch.
Should we get more senior
exploring
housing out of it?
out of the.
Increasing it? Increasing the density? No, that doesn't.
No.
So, but the developer agreement, we take away the age restriction, right, on that one section of choice?
Well, they would build age restricted, but
No.
it wouldn't be
The-
permitted
within-
be age
Within
restricted.
3 months, the two regulatory agreements will be approved. That will lock in the affordability and the age restriction associated with the affordability. So that closes that condition. The only condition that would be open-ended is the unit cap.
So why don't we why don't we pull this from spring town meeting? By the time we present it in fall town meeting, that development in UMass West will be pretty much built, or
It will
pretty
be,
much
it's
set
phased
in
over about
place.
18 months.
Yeah, but it's gonna be, they're not gonna be able to change it in,
Well, we know that now.
well, yes, but they will all know, we'll all feel a lot more comfortable
Yes, I
in
get
five,
what you're saying.
in a few months.
I do
And then
get
we'll
it.
change the development agreement when that's,
If they're amendable.
yeah, like then we'll know about the affordability, we'll know about the
Yeah.
10% affordability. That thing will be pretty much set
Or we
in,
could maybe have a special town meeting for just this at some interval time before October, like
Sure.
July, so that we still have an opportunity to,
Change it.
change
Blow
it.
another
Yeah.
couple of tens of
UPS,
thousands
have
of dollars
UPS in the
doing
back
that.
door, ready to come in.
The only other question I'd ask is, I know we looked at this before, would it make sense to try to add an additional parcel or so to the Littleton Road District to try to, so that you could increase the you could not increase the density substantially there?
You could do that, but it wouldn't be part of this public hearing. We'd have to
Yeah.
re-advertise, right?
Same
That's a
thing,
good
if we
thought.
switch gears and go to UPS, we have to go through the whole.
Correct.
process
Right.
again.
Right. So
Even just to change the
so
footprint.
if you're inclined to keep the proposal as is and wait till summer or fall, the only thing we're talking about is the development agreement.
Okay.
Like, the development agreement would need to be modified under that scenario anyway. The only change will be, as you said, on the ground, more of it's built.
I think it'd be more, again, I
Less
mean,
likely.
to your point, like,
And-
development can always, something can always happen, but I think when there's a lot of money sunk in, the chances are of it being changed.
And I'm also worried about those state agreements not being,
Yeah, me too, the affordability.
Completed yet.
Yeah, yeah, I'd rather have that done
in hand.
in hand and then go and change this. If the state's gonna play games with us, I think we should play right back at them.
Okay.
Yep.
the,
Yeah.
They took the fight right
Indoor
away.
voice, please.
Sorry, you're right, just indoor voice.
We're tabling it?
Just my final comment. You can label it whatever you want, gamesmanship or what have you, moving the goalpost. We're not gonna be able to control any of that.
You're right.
The only thing the town can control at this point is modifying that development agreement or going back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Or
So,
increasing the,
going back to the drawing board.
That's going
Or
back to the
adding-
drawing
Right.
board.
Or adding
Honestly,
another
if we
parcel.
were to increase density, we should have another public hearing, invite the people back.
We'd have to, if you're gonna go back to the drawing board, and if it's gonna be anything significantly more than what John is suggesting, we need to find additional money to continue our efforts with NIMCOG. We need to do more outreach, more compliance modeling, a new round of public hearings,
The only,
set a new warrant.
the only thing I could see us doing in that case that's not completely picking a new area is the 110 condos we've already essentially cut in half. So we could add those other two buildings in that property. And that may give us enough. We'd have to model it,
Correct.
and that wouldn't be a huge change.
yeah, but
would
wouldn't we
be-
have to take out all the numbers of the UMass West? That would come out of the, wouldn't that come out of the district, or just that part of the district would have lower?
No, we'd be starting where we are tonight.
Yeah, it would be expanding the 110 district
Okay.
to add capacity.
Yeah, and that's,
We'd
the
still have a
obvious answer
development
here.
agreement with part of it having too low of density. I mean, that problem wouldn't have been solved yet.
Correct. Under any scenario, unless you go back into UMass West or remove UMass West, we're gonna have to modify the development agreement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or,
So my point is the longer you wait, we don't know to what extent this whole approval process continues to evolve. What we know is what we know right now, and we know we have a clear path to approval based upon HLC's written comments. And we're in full control of that. Everything else, we're not really in control of.
So can I make a suggestion? The development agreement was executed by the select board. It may be helpful for them to provide some input before you make
Yeah.
a decision whether or not to table this.
Yeah.
And then you're left with what do you want to do about tomorrow night and moving forward. If you table, I'm not sure that it gets a spring town meeting. If you choose to move forward with FinCom and then begin your engagement with the select board is scheduled to begin review of zoning articles on April 8th, I believe, after the election. So,
We should probably this should be a joint meeting with the select board. Like, this shouldn't be like us going to them coming to us. Like, this should be,
Right.
we should schedule a joint meeting to discuss
the
this.
final comment on this.
Yeah.
There's nothing preventing the zoning from going to spring town meeting with the understanding that the agreement between the select board and planning board is to modify the development agreement.
Yeah.
The development agreement
If
can
it
be
passes town meeting.
can be modified
Yeah.
after spring town meeting.
I think that's the path of least resistance, and that's probably what we ought to do. On the other hand, I think we need to drag some state reps in here and grill them pretty hard. I mean, sit them down and cross-examine them.
But
And
at town-
shut them up when they start to
That's
babble.
helpful.
At town
Until
meeting,
we
you're gonna have
find
to
out
explain
how
what
they're
the
gonna fix
changes are
this.
gonna be.
Right.
Otherwise, they're gonna vote this down.
Right.
'Cause they're-
I agree.
Under the
I don't
scenario we're
think-
talking about, there wouldn't be any changes to the zoning.
They're
No,
gonna-
no changes to the
development.
They're gonna wanna understand the whole plan.
Understood?
I think we should wait. I think we should meet with the select board to make a plan about the development agreement, because it sounds like that's given, it's gonna have to be changed. And then we should give it a couple of months, hopefully for the other two issues to be resolved, the affordability component
Special
and the
town
age
meeting.
restriction,
Special town meeting.
and have a special town,
I think I
have
agree with
slot for a special town meeting, like if we can in June, before people all start departing for the summer. Hopefully that timetable works, it's tight. We're already on a tight timetable and we just made it tighter. But I don't think town meeting's gonna agree to
So
unknowns.
confusing now.
we have a
Yeah.
select board member here tonight.
I know, but she can't speak for the select board. I just ran into this the other night.
Yeah.
So just so I'm getting a little confused here. Do we have to change, regardless, do we have to change the capacity for UMass West?
For
If
the-
we add, like,
The development agreement?
Yes.
yes.
If we're gonna use this plan, we do.
If we present
No, our
this,
MBTA has 15 in it.
I don't think you have to change the density restriction in the development agreement if you find an alternative approach to getting to the requisite number of units.
So
Can
Anita,
have a
our-
sub-district with less than 15 units per acre.
So our model in the zoning for UMass area is 15 units per acre. The development agreement brings it under that,
13.
13.
Okay.
So if we get rid of the development agreement, we wouldn't have to change the zoning
We
at all.
don't get rid of it, we modify it.
Or modify
Either way.
it. But if we remove the density restriction from the agreement, then we don't have to change our modeling and our zoning. The MBTA zoning can go as is.
But we'd have to still come up with a few more units.
No, we don't.
No.
Because the model for UMass campus is based on the 15 for the zoning that we're doing. But the development agreement brings it under that.
Is
So
that
if
right,
we
Kelly?
remove the cap on the development agreement, it goes to
Right,
15.
Can you move the cap on the 215?
That's my point. As
Okay.
soon as you go back into the model, it warrants a new review by HLC. What
Which we
HLC has
prefer
said
that.
at this point is, or NIMCOG and what council is and what we're discussing is, if we leave everything in the model exactly as is, and we modify the development agreement, we're good to go.
And exactly, what do you have to modify in the development agreement?
You
Just the
gotta take out
restriction?
the unit capacity,
For that, which is right now at 13.
which is at, voluntarily, they proposed it at 13.
So can we move that just to 15 to
It
match
says
this?
350 units, 394 is what it says, in totality.
Right.
So that
We
needs to be,
wouldn't make it unrestricted altogether. We would have
just
to
need to
put,
remove the numbers.
so you can't make it to 15 to match
Well,
the
the
MBTA.
zoning bylaw would limit it to
The
15.
zoning would limit it to 15.
Okay.
So the-
For MBTA.
Yeah.
The development agreement's more restrictive than the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
Then you'd have to remove the provisions related to age restriction and affordability. You'd have to reduce the affordability from 15 down to 10.
Unless we keep moving forward with the 15 in the zoning.
But that has to be
Correct.
the financial.
Correct.
So that would help.
But that would have required a modification to the bylaw, because that economic feasibility assessment wasn't going to be ready for Springtown meeting anyway,
Right, but that's something we've always said we
Yes,
want to
yes.
keep pursuing.
which we can.
But that's going to help the developer right there, dropping it from 15 to 10.
He'll like
He-
that.
he
He'll
can-
like that.
He can get more prices, more units
He's
at full
dropping
price.
3%.
Well, no, because the affordable units are mainly in the choice development, which is proposed at 100% affordable, and that they're not going to deviate from that.
So there's no affordability in the other units that we
6
approved?
There's only
units.
6 units.
Yeah, 6 units.
So they can't take those 6 and drop them to 4?
No.
Okay.
Remember, they already have an approval from you that includes those 6 units
Yeah.
as affordable.
Now, if we didn't want to do anything to the agreement, then we'd have to figure out the other areas.
I don't think that there's any scenario that you don't have to make adjustments to the development agreement because of the affordability.
Well, I mean,
because
if we wanted to keep
restriction.
the density
Yeah.
in the agreement, we would still have to find other areas, and we still don't know if the state is okay with us keeping that agreement. And I think that was Evan's point, is that we would still have to go back to the state to find out if that's going to be okay, which
Right.
would take a
Yeah,
while.
I think our.
As of right now, we have a path given to us by them to move forward.
And I think we ought to take it.
And we should take it. But I would prefer personally if we waited to take it until we have the affordability and the age restriction approved in place.
And so that, as I said, is a minimum of 2 to 3 months.
Minimum of, or it should be in 2 to 3 months?
Well, I say minimum because there are other aspects to the choice project that may come into play with their review. Meaning building permits are not issued, financing's not in place.
Let's just
So-
do it.
So it all remains to be determined.
Right.
But we've submitted the application today. They've indicated 2 to 3 months due to their workload.
And they need more from Choice pertaining to the
I don't know.
financing before they'll approve it?
I don't know to what extent the state approves a regulatory agreement without building permits and financing being in place. That's, I think you've raised some of those concerns as well. So again, if your strategy, if you're delaying because you hope that the state approves these 2 regulatory agreements, which as council said, locks in the affordability and the age restriction, that may or may not happen within the next 2 or 3 months.
But I think the further along that is, the more comfortable I know I would be, and I think town meeting would be, with removing those pieces from the development agreement. And that's my
But
concern.
in any event, again, the development agreement is an agreement that was executed by the select board, and they should be
Right, well,
weighing
we
in on
have to
this.
address
before-
that separately, but right now, we're trying to make our plan. And then we'll have to discuss it with the select board and see if they concur.
I think we should simply go forward as we are now, let the adjustments to the development agreement take place as they can, given the select board's
Going
schedule.
forward
I'm
right
I'm
now-
not gonna be any more comfortable waiting
So
2
wait a
months than I
minute.
am doing it now.
Say we go to town meeting, this gets approved as is. We just need to be compliant by the end of the year.
Right.
So the select board theoretically doesn't need to change the development agreement
Not this instant.
until,
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's a question
Till
of
we
what,
submit.
what is HLC gonna be
Yeah.
Till we submit to
requiring
HLC.
of us in order
When
to
do we have to submit?
give
By
give
December,
us
right?
their
Right.
approval or whatever.
We have till December to submit, so we
But for the
can-
here and now, if you choose to continue, tomorrow night at FinCom, and then April 8th at Select Board. And that could be the time where we begin this conversation with the
Yep.
Select Board with the assistance of
That's what
of
we need to
council.
do.
Let's put it on the agenda, and we'll all meet them there.
The
Yeah.
other option is you delay it a couple weeks, and maybe we can call a special within the regular, if it's just a 2 or 3 week time period. Otherwise, you're talking about not an April town meeting and a special town meeting or a fall town meeting.
But I'm looking at the likelihood of this passing a town meeting.
That is a concern.
That's a huge concern for
Yeah.
me, because if we are not comfortable with those agreements, I know town meeting won't be.
Yep.
And if they're not comfortable with those agreements being removed without more certainty behind it, they're not gonna pass it.
Well, the
They may
other
not
thing,
pass it anyways.
Right, but there's
So
less
I'd
of a
rath-
chance
but
if
I'd
there's
rather
no
go forward
certainty.
with it now, because if they don't, what if we do a special election, they don't like the zones that
Well,
we
the
picked?
flip side of
Then
that
you
is
get-
if they
now
don't
you're down
pass
to
it,
the
I
wire.
don't think we can bring it back in the same form, can we?
We won't know why they didn't pass it.
But the
That's a
re-
problem.
Hopefully, there'll be discussion if it's a location or just not complying.
I mean, the way we went through the schedule was to get into the April town meeting so that if it got denied, we could rework it for the fall. So now if you're saying delay it to a special,
No,
then if we
it's-
get denied there, then you're still going the fall.
yeah.
So then you might have to do another special one if it gets denied again.
Yeah, that special may need to be used a different way.
So I don't know if it's wise to continue just right now, or I think it's,
I'm sorry, what are we seeking from HLC at this point? That we've submitted something to them, what is it that they're giving to us?
They give us
That-
their compliance review as well as the zoning review.
And is that binding?
Is that, and what is that, I mean, is that based on us
You know the answer to that.
saying that we?
I don't think it is.
Of course it's not.
Is that based on us saying that we will modify the developer agreement, or do they need to see some evidence of our modifying the developer agreement? I mean, what is the standard that they're
I
going to
think
be
they want us to
applying?
pick up.
There isn't any yet. I would fully expect that they're going to want to see evidence that the development agreement has been modified.
I mean, here's the thing, when we presented UMass.
I'm sorry, just to
Sorry.
finish my point. So the fact is that I don't want to go into town meeting where we don't have something from HLC because they're holding out on us because we haven't done enough on the developer agreement. That to me is something that I would want to wait for, that to firm, you know, in other words, I want to understand the timeline that's going to get us, that's going to get HLC to agree with us, because otherwise
Well, I discussed
town
that
meeting's
with
going to
them.
say, you know, why, you don't even
I
have.
had a-
I don't
I
think
got
it's
a call
wise to
with-
change the development agreement before you see if you're gonna get this zoning passed by town meeting, though. That's gotta happen afterwards.
Correct, and that was what was discussed with Kelly, myself, and Mike, and the two staff members from HLC, that timeline-wise, town meeting could consider approving the MBTA zoning overlay, and the development agreement would be modified afterwards. And they seemed, that seemed acceptable to them.
And as long as we have the agreement from everyone that the agreement will be changed, we should be okay.
Correct.
Correct. So I think if you stay the course, have this conversation with the select board beginning on April 8th, between April 8th and May 2nd, which this article comes up on, continuation, working with council. You've already indicated that the applicant is amenable to modifying.
I have not reached out to the applicant,
okay, I
but
thought-
there's no downside to them
Correct.
to be amenable to
But the
modifying, so I
notion
don't
of,
anticipate
the notion
any
of everybody
reluctance.
getting an increased level of comfort, education, and awareness to close those concerns, we have time.
But see, that's not where the concern lies. The concern lies is that once that agreement has been modified, and without those state, the state forms completed for affordability and
I hear what you're saying, but if
Age
town meeting
restriction.
approves it in early May, what's the statutory requirement for the town to submit to the AGs after a voted town meeting? Is there a time limit where you,
90, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 90 days, I believe.
it's 90 days, that they have 90 days to review and approve, but what's the time limit for the town to submit it?
I don't know off the top of my head.
But Evan, that,
think it's-
again, that's not my point. My point is that if we go into town meeting and tell the town meeting reps that those state agreements are not in place yet, and the state has already done some shifting on us with this, what's the chances of them pulling those agreements and not approving those agreements, and now we have zero protections?
I hear what you're saying, but if town meeting takes action in May, and you have until December to achieve compliance, that's more than 6 months where the town we don't have to submit to the AG's office immediately,
Definitely not immediately.
and we definitely don't need to submit immediately to HLC. We have basically 6 months of waiting time to see what happens with those regulatory agreements, and to Anita's point, wait until the 11th hour to modify the development agreements.
But we won't get town meeting to agree to
No,
that.
Well,
but
that
here's
all
the
would
thing
have
though,
to be
Chris, I'm thinking
explained.
but here's the thing though, like, I'm thinking, when UMass West first came in front of town meeting, right? It was, okay, we have to comply with the MBTA zoning, this is what they're thinking of, so this is what we approved, right? Well, that wasn't final, and now the zoning, their requirements changed.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking as a town meeting rep, all right, so now we have to increase the capacity because we modeled this on the capacity that we originally thought we had, and that's why we did the development agreement. Now we find out they changed the capacity on it, so we're going to increase it. So I'm okay, I think I'm okay with that modification, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The MBT zoning didn't have age restriction on it, right? That doesn't have it. We put it in our development agreement, but this developer said they're gonna do the age restriction. They want to do that, they agreed to it, they're gonna apply for it. And so we just need to take that off of our development agreement. So I'm comfortable with that, because, again, when we first went down this road, we went down with best
Yeah, exactly.
guidance from the state of what the final
Yeah.
rule, I'm just trying to, and I hear what you're saying.
And the other thing is I don't think they're gonna, I mean, maybe call me naive, but, I mean, they want more affordable housing.
Yeah.
They want more
Right. And-
age-restricted housing.
But that's exactly my point, because if we do this and those agreements with the state are not in place yet.
The state is they that I'm referring to. The state wants more affordable housing. The state wants more
Housing.
senior housing, and the state wants more housing. And so if they don't,
But they also want higher volume. And so they could say, we don't like the density, increase your density. I'm just worried that if we take all of these protections out, there is still a chance that the affordability and the senior restrictions completely go away.
well, we don't have to submit it if they go away. Then we say, okay, fine, we have to do something else.
Yeah,
or-
but town meeting does not trust the planning board, so they're not going to trust us to pull it after they voted for it.
I don't know.
Do you think there'd be an increased level of trust once it's explained to FinCom and Select Board, and it works through its process between now and town meeting?
I think there's always a chance that the current developers and current choice housing could pull out without those state agreements in place. And Mike, I think,
No.
No.
No, not, it's not happening. Not happening.
I don't think it
development.
will either.
It's
How
already
long does it
started.
take to get a
Property,
housing
that
permit?
property.
Well,
To
we
start
are not
building.
going to get certainty.
I mean, this is our
Forget
own town,
certainty.
right? That would
But
grant
You're
the
going
housing
with
permit?
best
State agreements
guess.
are done.
And they won't
Yep.
grant a housing permit until
No,
there's
you won't.
funding?
No, so
And
'Cause
is
we won't have
funding
done our
in the
half.
process of being sought, or is funding going to be sought at some future date?
David Hedison has indicated that he's approximately 12 to 18 months away from receiving all the funding he needs to advance the project. He's not going to submit for a building permit until he's fully financed.
So we won't get this approval for 12 to 18
No,
months?
the regulatory agreement that council's referring to will be approved.
I thought you said it was contingent
Well,
on
we're not-
housing
it's
permits
not-
and funding.
It's not clear. It's not clear at this point to what extent they legally will prevent it from being approved without building permits and without financing. I don't have enough experience with that. I'm just saying that is a scenario.
So in my experience, local action units are approved for inclusion on the town subsidized housing inventory once local action approval is granted. And that does not require that building permits be issued. In fact, it's quite possible that the LAU units could be approved by EOHLC, and then, so they would count towards the town's, the town's SHI, but 12 months after the initial approval of those units, they would fall back off the SHI until building permits are issued. So that process makes it very clear that the LAU can be approved prior to building permits being issued.
So we expect those regulatory agreements to be approved per council.
In the 2 to 3 month?
Correct.
Or timeframe. So it's not best case scenario. It's in the 2 to 3 month timeframe that we initially talked about?
It should, yes.
Yeah, we made this zoning change to that property to be part of this MBTA regulation. The
That was
town
the goal.
voted on it.
But I think until those regulatory agreements are in place, people are not going to feel comfortable with us removing all of the other restrictions.
No.
Then,
That's my point.
They don't pass it, they don't pass
I
it,
don't-
then find out soon. Then let
I
them,
don't think we'll get the town meeting vote if we do this before those agreements
But-
are in place.
So those agreements, so those have already been submitted. The select board has submitted them. They're in the process. Again, now it kind of goes through to zoning and what's being built, right? So those have already been submitted. We're modifying the development agreement, which in itself is not a very common thing that happens, that you have a development agreement that follows land, right? We did, because we were concerned. We earmarked this 2 years ago as an MBTA community, like, I mean, that's what was presented to town meeting. That's what,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what
I thought it was.
That's how we sold it, that's what, why I
That's
voted for.
how I bought it.
It's
That's
a
how
little
it-
bit maddening that the state would turn around and do this. to
Right,
us.
like, and I get that, and I get that, you know,
That's how I
the
bought it.
final regulations weren't there, but our assumption, that's why I voted for, was that this would, these units would count, right? Now the zoning, you know, they've come back, they're finalized, it's more dense, we can't have age restriction, we can't have this, okay, got it. We can't put that in our development agreement, but they've already submitted the forms for it.
But
They've already-
those forms have not been approved yet.
I get it,
And
but-
that's the concern.
Well, and to clarify, what we're talking about is, with regard to the affordability, that's choice, right? That's part of the, overseen by the Chelmsford Housing Authority. I don't think that there should be too much concern that they're not going to move forward and do what they've proposed to do. And I think that there should be a level of comfort that we can trust David Hedison and the Housing Authority to move forward and build what they've proposed to build, what they're under contract to build.
He has to now.
Yeah, I mean.
He has no choice.
Can,
mean,
can town meeting vote to approve with a condition that the approved zoning is not submitted to the state or HLC for a period of 2 or 3 more months until those regulatory agreements?
So I just took a quick look at the statute, and it's supposed to be submitted to the AG's office within 30 days.
What was that?
30 days.
After town meeting
They gotta
votes?
get you to the end of May.
Any zoning change under Chapter 40, Section 32 has to be submitted to the Attorney General's office for review and approval. And the timing of that is within 30 days of the close of town meeting.
So pushing out to a special town meeting, does that make sense?
I mean, it's March,
Yeah, but
April, May, so let's try and do it in the middle of June.
I think you're still left with having this conversation with FinCom Select Board.
yeah,
Well, I think we should have those proceeding
Yeah.
at the same time, but not try to get it passed by anyone until middle
Have
of
that
June, when we
conversation.
have that in our pocket, which we don't currently have. I agree with Chris, I think it's too controversial to have all these little open-ended threads, or loose threads and open-ended questions, whatever the analogy is.
And to be clear, I do think it'll go forward. I do think those will get approved, but
Right.
I honestly don't think we're gonna get the support from town meeting if those aren't approved yet.
I agree with you. I also think that this board might have a little bit better position with regards to town meeting and trust maybe than some prior compositions of this board. So I don't know I don't know what to expect with regards to that, but
And I think bringing, you know, we brought in even, you know, David Hedison, he's, you know, very well known in town, people trust him, right? Like, he's, you know, fine character, you know, there's a certain amount of trust even.
well, they're the
with him.
Chelmsford Housing
Right, right.
Authority.
Yeah, they are. They're pretty good.
So you're talking about is continue tomorrow evening, Select Board, have this conversation. Worst case is you're either delaying it, special town meeting, or
Worst case.
maybe it moves forward.
Yeah.
If everyone can articulate a strategy and is
Yeah.
comfortable. Okay.
Yep.
So we're on for the 8th.
You're on for tomorrow evening, and then starting with the Select Board on the 8th.
I think it's the first thing. Didn't he say it
I
was the
didn't
first
check the
thing?
agenda yet.
For who?
What time on the
FinCom
finance?
is the 5th
6:30.
item.
Oh,
So what's that, do you think? What
When
time
does
they
does
start?
FinCom start?
6:30 tomorrow. 6:30.
6:30?
Any idea
Okay.
what
So you-
time would be?
So you're leaving your hearing open.
yep.
Hold on.
You want to continue it to, does it make sense, can we continue it to tomorrow evening and then the 8th? Are we able to do that legally? Can't post it for tomorrow, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to post it
Okay.
tomorrow. Well,
So we don't all,
has it already been posted? I mean, if they were going to be speaking with the FinCom
FinCom
anyways,
posted a public hearing for their review.
but the planning
We
board
didn't
didn't.
post.
so no more than 3 of us can be in the room.
No, we can be there.
Well, you can't be there and have
And
members.
participate, yeah.
You wouldn't be able to have any
I'll
members
skip it.
participate.
We've discussed this in enough detail where 3 members can speak on behalf of the board.
We learned the other night, too.
But I can post a planning board meeting for the select board meeting of the 8th.
So the intention.
We should
here-
ask the chair if that's okay
Yeah,
with,
I'll reach out. Okay.
So the
We've
intent, though,
covered
is
it.
tomorrow is to present this plan with the plan to modify the developer's agreement.
with the, yeah.
Yep.
So you have to add that to your presentation.
And who's going?
I'll do that tonight when I get home at midnight.
Okay,
With your
Fifth on the
copious
agenda.
spare time,
Okay.
right?
12:30.
so I will take a motion.
Move to continue to the 8th, which is our joint meeting.
Yep.
We don't have a joint
Well,
meeting yet.
Or which way-
Or-
well,
or to the next
which is our
meeting.
presumptive
To the next
joint
meeting,
meeting.
to be determined.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have number 2. I think we're gonna get rid of,
Also with Paul.
Yeah, do you need me for anything else tonight?
I think, no.
Thank you,
Paul.
Kelly and
Thank you
Mike.
so much.
Thank you for putting up with us.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Kelly. I don't think we're gonna do
Thank you.
anything with site plan and special permit rules and regulations. If that's okay with people.
Yep.
We have a request to continue 10 Hildreth Street due to somebody having a conflict. Can I have a motion?
I move we continue 10 Hildreth until, and what's the appropriate date here?
4:10.
4:10?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Can we not move everything
Can I
to
ask a
one
quick
day?
question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make sure, like, when we start, like, if moving,
Yeah.
having meetings, can we not push everything to the next meeting? Can we
Right.
try to
So
stagger
at
it?
the rate things have been continuing, it may not matter.
But we still have to prep for it.
So,
Yeah,
so
I know.
so that's a question I
Presume we're
have.
prepped now.
How, is there on the bylaws how a proponent can cancel right up to the time of the public hearing?
Well, they're not canceling, they're requesting a continuance.
Yeah, but we're ready to go. Public was coming, and then we got a
no way the public
notification.
knew about that.
We got a notification.
I see at least one person
What time was
that
it,
it
5
came
o'clock
to.
or 4 o'clock today? I mean, is
Well, I
there,
know
is
you
there, is there,
emailed.
I'm just asking for, is there a bylaw in the town of Chelmsford that, then maybe,
But there is an amount of time by which they're supposed to have brought their plan forward.
But the
And if
board, the
not-
board has to consider and grant each continuance.
Okay, but then it pushes their time out? If they have 90 days from the time the public hearing is open, the continuance
No,
keeps
the
pushing
hear-
that out?
The hearings are indefinite.
Okay.
so
And-
there's no
and
rules on that?
where there are rules, if they request a continuance, they are voluntarily extending the
Yeah.
board's time to act.
And then we don't necessarily have to take it up at the next meeting. We have within 65 days, right, to take it up?
No, we're well beyond any of those
No, but I'm
provisions.
just
So
trying
if
to
you-
say,
You
we're,
don't have
we're,
to put it on the 10th.
You,
We can
correct,
kick it out.
correct.
we
You
were
don't-
prepared for the meeting.
Correct.
We
You do
canceled
not
last
have to
minute.
put it on for
If
the,
we have a full
for the
thing on
date
the
that
10th,
they're.
Then why don't we
suggest
put
we
them off
kick it out.
4 weeks?
Or- Yeah.
I'm just saying, I just want to get an understanding while I was driving when I got that notification.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then
Yeah.
tell them they're on for the 27th. No.
No.
It's not public
No.
right now, it's
No,
not
no.
public.
Well, it has to be an agreement. It's just not one-sided, where one person can continue it at the last moment.
Throw you out of here.
It has to
Okay.
be an agreement.
Thank you.
We are agreeing. Okay, so I think we push it to the 24th.
Is it the 10th, 24th? Yeah.
24th, you canceled because you want to attend pre-town meeting.
I thought we decided we were gonna have stuff if we needed to,
Well,
before or after.
minor stuff is what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Not
was
very
minor.
minor.
Okay. I guess we continue it to the
To the
10th.
No,
How
we
many-
can
how
push,
many
we
on the
can
10th
push
right
them
now?
off.
How many, what's on the 10th right now?
Everything that we continue this evening.
So everything, again, I'm going midnight, like, so we're not doing the 24th,
and-
so next,
What's the next one after the 24th?
It'd be May
15th?
8th.
All right,
All right, let's do it then.
May 8th.
Okay,
I make a motion to continue to May 8th.
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next we have 270 Bill, wait,
270, I would strongly encourage you to continue to April 10th.
okay.
Okay, what's the,
The sensitivity with that is that the peer reviews are scheduled to be ready for presentation
Okay.
to the Concom on the 9th and Planning Board on the 10th.
okay, are we expecting anything more from DEP on this?
I wouldn't expect anything, but.
Okay, You never know. It can drop out of the sky.
I'll take a motion.
I move to continue 270 Bill Record Road to the 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's do some work. 93 Brick Hill Road, requesting site plan approval for the construction of 49,000 square foot industrial warehouse building. I'm gonna waive the rest of the reading if anybody objects.
It's fine.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members
Sorry.
of the board. For the record, Christine Hung, attorney for the applicant, D&D Homes. With me tonight, I have Brian Goudreau, our site civil engineer from Hancock Associates, and John Higgins of Higgins Environmental. At the last meeting, the board requested that we come back with an update from the Chelmsford Water District and the results of the hydrogeo analysis that was performed. As you know, a portion of the site is located within the Chelmsford Aquifer Protection District. The Board of Health, through its rules and regulations, and the Chelmsford Water District requested that the applicant perform a hydrogeological investigation, and that the scope was developed in conjunction with the Board of Health, the Chelmsford Water District, and the applicant. Those parameters were agreed upon, and testing was done. Groundwater and soil samples were collected and tested, and a summary of those findings was prepared in a report by GeoHydroCycle. John Higgins of Higgins Environmental, and LSP, was engaged to review GeoHydroCycle's findings of soil and groundwater quality in accordance with MCP regulations. Just to clarify for the board, an LSP is a licensed site professional. They're licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and are deemed experts in waste site cleanup. They are governed by professional standards and really perform an independent analysis of the data collected as it relates to contamination on a site. Mr. Higgins applied the established methodologies of the LSP, and he rendered an opinion that the data found was not at a level that required it wasn't a reportable condition under the MCP. He prepared a report which was provided to the board, and he had discussions with Brandon Canada, who is the Chelmsford Water District Superintendent. They did a site visit. They went over the report together, and since then, Mr. Kanata has issued a clean letter basically saying that he has no further concerns about the project as it relates to the aquifer. And that letter was provided to the board as well. So I'd like to turn it over now to Mr. Higgins, and he can walk you through his findings. And then we'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Higgins with Higgins Environmental. Thank you very much, Christine. That was a very good job. Made my job a lot easier. So I am a Massachusetts licensed site professional, was engaged by D&D Homes to review the work by GeoHydroCycle, as you've seen in the report. Gee, that's a good job, Christine. I don't really have much else to say, but I did not find a reportable concentration issue. So, in our world of the MCP, the purpose of the MCP is to regulate things that are reportable because they reach a level that needs to be addressed. We didn't reach that level here, and it's not reportable condition. I don't even know. So, this is an historical residential property. There is no industrial or commercial sources of the particular compound here. I think most people are probably concerned about because they hear about it is PFAS, this per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. We found in one of the wells there at the top of the screen, MW1. It's outside the Zone 2 and the Aquifer Protection District. It's in what we call an RC GW2, which stands for Reportable Concentration GW2 area. It all depends on the environmental setting in terms of what the criteria is. And, when you're outside of a drinking water area, the criteria just isn't as stringent anymore. PFAS are just so commonly used, they're everywhere. And in residential septic systems, it's just so. Yeah, so, I don't, I guess I'd like to entertain your questions here, because there's a lot of topics to cover, and I don't want to try to cover everyone's questions ahead of time. So does anyone have any questions from reviewing the report?
Well, pertaining to PFAS, is that like typical you would find at one of these sites? The amount that you saw, that 80, whatever that was?
All right, so
Or is that elevated?
I'd say it depends, well, for a non-commercial industrial site, for like in a residential setting, I would say it's in the low end. And so just to build upon, what Christine mentioned, so this is in combination with the Board of Health and the original scope of work for GeoHydrocycle. So we have a total of 5 monitoring wells with soil and groundwater sampling. And those monitoring wells were situated hydraulically downgrade into the residence, hydraulically downgrade into what they believe the septic system was, to look for like what could the impacts be and how bad could they be and where's the best place to look. And those wells were non-detectable for PFAS. The only instance of PFAS we had in groundwater of any concern, well, it's less than reportable, was MW1, which is our hydraulically upgrading monitoring well. So it may be, and we also had the basic water chemistry in that well, had higher sulfates and dissolved solids and road salt issues, something else going on there. Didn't see any evidence of a source there. We did a soil sample around some refuse there. Now the refuse out there is, I guess what you'd find or not be unexpected to find on an historically developed residential property that might have included some farming. There are a lot of trailers and just stuff, frames, the trailers were gone. But the levels are consistent with what I've seen, not just in Massachusetts, but New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont.
Okay. I got no concerns.
Yeah, I have some questions, if I could. So the MW1, that is not in a zone 2, and that's why, if it were in a zone 2, then would the concentrations be reportable at that point?
If it was in the zone 2, the concentrations would be reportable.
Okay. And if you go to the next one, Evan, that shows the gradients, maybe it's the one above it. There's one that shows the groundwater contours. Yeah.
This one?
Oh, that's in the you have to
go
queue
down.
down into the GHC as an attachment.
It's PDF page 27.
Okay.
Am I
Yeah,
getting
you gotta
close?
keep going. That's,
Closer.
you're still in my, you're getting closer. Okay, keep going. That's a good, keep going. That's a
There we
good
go.
figure,
Okay.
right? Okay.
So we're
Joe.
talking about the one in the upper, in this.
Yeah, the
one with
northern top.
Northern end. So,
Yeah.
so the gradient shows that it's going towards the zone 2.
The gradient.
Is that correct?
The hydraulic gradient as depicted shows it's going toward the zone 2.
Right, okay. And so then the question that I have is there concern about the fact that you have reportable levels that would be reportable in a zone 2? And it looked to me like somewhere on the order of 4 or so times more, because it's 20 nanograms, right? And you had something like 90 something and then 80 something, the PFAS 6 total. And so is there a concern about the fact that you have such high conditions for a zone 2 with a strong gradient towards the zone 2?
No.
Okay.
And the reason being that outside the zone 2, the criteria is significantly higher. So instead of 20 nanograms per liter, it's 40 million nanograms per liter.
Right, but
Just
I'm
to
saying,
give you an idea that you can't, so the criteria are based upon the environmental setting. So you're either in it or out.
Right.
Now you could argue if it was a disposal site, if it was a quote disposal site, which is what I work on under the MCP, where you could really then you use the term exacerbate.
So like if the concentrations were so grievous that you started adding water in that or some other substance, you could exacerbate that and make it worse. So if you look at the stormwater handbook, it talks about that for like sites that have activity and use limitations because they're so bad, they just cover the stuff over. They don't allow infiltration. It references landfills is another big source of impact. It references sites that have been capped. And certainly areas that have like uncontrolled sources of oil or hazardous materials. Neither of those apply here. So it doesn't have, and there is kind of a proof there about, it has to be a really strong case that you would have like a significant impact if that were to like get loose, so to speak. And so we don't have a source that's going to get loose. But let's just say for the argument's case that impact like moved over without reducing its concentration. In order for it to get to any place of concern, it's going to be into that wetland area, which is a riverine wetland. So there's also these site-specific factors that come into play as to like, what's the likelihood, of being hit by something, and depending upon where you stand. So if water flows into that wetland, that stream water, it shows it on the chart there too, it flows to the south away from your well, which is 1,000 feet away. And the other thing so I think part of this also comes down to what might change the land use that would maybe change the conditions that allow things to flow differently. And, sure, there's going to be a development here, but that center part of the property, that mound, is a mound for a reason. And you can see those red marks. It's mostly bedrock. So it has a high elevation. The groundwater around the edge, if you look at like which way is it flowing from, what is it flowing from? So it on one side it comes up against a high bedrock that's dry. So I think the groundwater flow you see is actually just related to the surface water moving up and down. In the primary direction of groundwater flow, there's some micro scale, but the macro scale is to the south. And you see that further down, and it's also reflected in the topography of the area.
Well, I was concerned about that one because that one does show, it looks to me like about as straight a path as possible towards the Zone 2, assuming that the Zone 2 designation is correct, which I'm not even perfectly convinced that it is if you think about a Zone 2. But nonetheless, let's just say that it is. Well, my concern is that is the place where you have high concentrations relative to Zone 2 of PFAS, which are also comparable concentrations to what we have on another site in town that we are also having addressed. And the additional concern of there being one of the two large infiltration beds slightly upstream or uphill of that, groundwater contour-wise. And so that, to me, raises the question of, do we want to have that large infiltration bed there as opposed to somewhere else where it's not going to be potentially pushing, whatever PFAS is existing currently at somewhere in that area where MW1, because again, you only have one point there. We don't know where to what extent that you have that level of concentration of PFAS in that area. And so to me, that is a concern, for me at least, a concern enough that I would want to see if we could have an LSP peer review to comment as to whether that makes sense to have that infiltration bed there or not.
All right, so under the stormwater regs, which is kind of, I think, the matter before us, because this is not a reportable condition, the part that relates to this is for a Zone 2 recharge area, which is a critical area, you need to demonstrate that there's a strong likelihood of a significant impact occurring to said area, taking into account site-specific factors. And so the site-specific factors that I've given, in addition to the low concentrations, that is not a disposal site or reportable, says this is not a strong likelihood of a significant impact occurring. That's my interpretation as an LSP.
And in the case of this other site in town, we also had that peer reviewed by our LSP, and I thought that was very constructive for us. So that's I guess that's my concern, and that's my request of this board is
There's
would
one
we-
other thing
would
I
we
could add, too.
Willing to request that.
So, there's also some infiltration on the property itself is required for any development, and it is, to my knowledge, equally dispersed at 5 different areas across the property. So you're not looking at like one area of large loading. So I think that's a
Well,
good
there are
distribution to
two
have.
very large,
Yeah.
am I not right, Brian? There are 2 larger beds, and then there are 4 smaller beds. And one of those 2 larger beds is nearby MW1 and also not downstream of it, but upstream of it. So you would expect that what, the existing conditions now are is that you're probably infiltrating spread over that area. But what you're doing with your stormwater is you're gathering a lot of that water, and then you're infiltrating it into that one specific location. So you're increasing, I would think, by a considerable amount, the amount of water that would flow when the development is in place than what's there now. And that therefore, that's my concern, that will that increased water flow, groundwater flow, cause there to be migration of what amount of PFAS is in around MW1, we don't know, because again, it's just one point in that area, would then cause that to migrate into a Zone 2 area and potentially cause issues for drinking water. So that's my concern, and that's something that I would like the board to consider asking for peer review of that, so that they may come back and say, you're absolutely right, there's no concern, go for it, or they may say you might want to move some of that infiltration, whatever. But that's something I think I'd like to get a peer review on.
And one other thing, if I could add, so the PFAS are actually soluble in water as well as being persistent. And so if you were to add treated stormwater into that area in a diffusive manner, without a source, any significant concentrations of impact, you'll be diluting it, which is, it's not a disposal site, so that's okay. So you're not looking at like just advectively moving a slug 1,000 feet away where it would ultimately be the consequence.
Yeah, but we don't know to what extent there is PFAS in the groundwater there.
Well, we
know
do
it's
sample
not.
it
We know it's
twice.
not at those other locations.
Yeah.
But in that area which would be basically where the water from that large infiltration bed would be going, is a place where we've identified one point in that area that has
All right.
PFAS at these
I think that infiltration area is about within 50 feet of this area. So, if you have significant amounts of impact, you tend to find significant areas of impact around them, and we don't have that here. Oh.
But this is very close to the East Chelmsford water.
Yes.
Extremely close, like really, really close, because I drove by there the other day after the storm, and I was like, whoa, I went and looked to see where this development was going, because it looked like it was all underwater when I saw right after that big storm. Yeah, it's really, really close to East Chelmsford water.
But, there's criteria, correct, for determining monitoring the sites that you test and monitor?
It's performance-based. So the LSP program is unique, really, in the country, in that we've moved from a prescriptive base. If you take 5 samples and you get results, you're all set. We actually have to think about this environmental setting, the site history, where to sample, to what resolution. So it's a pretty involved process, and it's been a great advantage to resolving a lot of difficult sites.
I think the way it's set up right now is that if you're in a Zone 2, that what would be if his well was 1 foot outside of the Zone 2, then it would not be considered reportable. If it was 1 foot on the other side of Zone 2, it would be considered reportable. It's black and white. There is no gray. There is no, range or slide or whatever.
Have a zone, it
That
has to have an edge, right?
Well, I'm just saying the way it's defined right now is you have one level for Zone 2 and you have another level outside Zone 2.
How many feet out of Zone 2 is this?
It's about 100 feet, so...
Evan, can you pull that back up? But if you look at the water itself is outside of Zone 2.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense.
Zone 2 is a contributing area.
What, he's talking surface water?
Yeah, if you
What
look at the
water,
line of
what do you mean by outside the Zone 2? Oh, the surface water. Yeah, well, it's surface water is outside the Zone 2. Zone 2 is the groundwater resource area, but, so the Zone 2 is based upon, basically the maximum amount of pumping you could do at a location in the most extreme area of recharge that would contribute to that. That's how it sets the limit, and there's some hydro-geo that comes into
Is
play.
there
I
any
mean,
way
a
to
zone,
mitigate?
a zone 2 is mapped, right? So a zone 2 is.
Oh, sorry, it always sounds like someone's talking behind me.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
So the zone 2 is mapped, so that's based on a very high level, review that was done by Weston and Sampson, I believe, or I think ours were done by Weston and Sampson. But that's why we have a provision in our Aquifer Protection District that if you feel like you are not within a zone 2, then you can have a hydrogeo study done to show that you are not contributing, that you are not part of that contribution to the aquifer. Okay, so that suggests to you that they anticipate that the zone as it is going to be imperfect, and that it's when you do a specific analysis in the area, then you can determine, yes, we are contributing, or no, we aren't contributing. I would suggest to you that based on what you saw in terms of the way the water's flowing, that it very well could be contributing. I wouldn't be surprised at all that one might say, well, this area is Zone 2 because of that. They aren't making that designation because they aren't making that finding. They're not looking to make that determination.
What did the water department?
Water Department, Brandon went there, looked at it, apparently thought it was fine. And that's perfectly fine for him to do, but the only thing I'll say is that we don't have the personnel at the water district that we used to in terms of their expertise and their knowledge, so.
This process is broken, as I've told you before, and I've implored both the Concom and Planning Board to put this on your agenda, take a vote to write a letter on letterhead to the Board of Health, copy the Select Board, the Town Manager, and the Water District to convene a meeting. The notion that Concom and Planning Board have your own jurisdiction and you want to pursue your own jurisdiction, and yet the town also has this Board of Health process, it's not leading in a good path. Regulatorily, it's just not, it's not viable, it's not sustainable.
What was the determination by COMCON last night? How did they?
They did not require peer review.
No, I heard that.
Oh,
part.
well, I didn't.
I was there. I heard that part, but I just.
Well, and they left it where they continued it. I think they wanted to see Brandon's letter because we had referenced it, but we hadn't seen that yet.
Peter was the most vocal, and I think he was.
Yeah, Peter, well.
He was, I don't want to, because Joel and Chris were there.
Yeah, we were all
I watched
there.
it. My understanding
We're all
was
there?
Peter seemed to find your methodology and conclusions reasonable.
The building's over here.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I would think any peer review would.
Is there a way to change the larger beds away from that one affected well?
This can't be underwater.
No.
It's too high up.
I mean, just
So,
I just want to.
if I could, so, we're talking regulated areas. It's like speed limits. You're driving 50 in a 55. Well, maybe you're going to be thinking about speeding up. Okay, but the speed limit's 55. And they set that for safety reasons, setbacks in roadways, visibility, and it's a similar kind of setup with hydrologic boundaries. There's soil types, there's gradients, there's the pumping depth, the gradient that it can induce before it dries out the aquifer. And all those come into play in terms of how they define their Zone 2 boundary, which is consistent with Chelmsford's Aquifer Protection District boundary. That's how we have to move forward. We have to say, here's someone that put their best foot forward, not independent of me. This is the state, maybe their consultants, that set these boundaries for a reason that's accepted across the Commonwealth. We have to make decisions based upon how those lay out on our place. And the other property I am familiar with because I looked into it out of curiosity, which is the science part of me. They're strongly within your Aquifer Protection District in the Zone 2. Mm-hmm. We have some wells that are in the Zone 2 and they were non-detectable. Are down gradient wells, the way I would interpret that beyond the
Does anyone else have
contours.
any other questions?
I have a question for Joel. Look, you're talking about the PFAS and the level of PFAS being high. I'm under the impression
level
that
of
the entire
PFAS
town
is
PFAS. Not just this area.
The level of PFAS 6 for groundwater is high if it were a zone 2.
Yeah. But
It's technically not in a zone 2, so it is not too high in that sense,
Yeah.
the way it is now.
And
I was only raising the question that is the fact that we're introducing a change to the site, and given its proximity to the designated Zone 2 area, would we want to have it peer reviewed by another LSP to confirm that putting the infiltration, leaving or having the infiltration there is something that will not result, as the applicant is claiming, will not have a negative impact on the water? That's really all I'm asking.
Okay.
Is
Does
for
anyone else
LSP
have
peer
anything
review.
else? they would like to
My
ask?
comment would be, I think, given that we are okay the way the zones are laid out, I understand Joel's point, but I don't think this is a situation that calls for us getting a peer review on this. I think that, I think we have to have some consideration for not delaying things. And I think in this case, I see rather differently than I see the 270 case.
Well, I also feel.
For the reasons mentioned.
I
don't,
also
because this
feel
is
like
closer
that
to our drinking water than 270, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but then the level is.
I also feel like
if
the
you look-
Chelmsford Water District and
Yeah.
Conservation, who also have jurisdiction, are comfortable with these parameters, and the consultant is.
Chelmsford
I'm not
Water
in
District does
favor
not
of-
have purview over stormwater.
No, they don't have purview
We
over
do.
it, but their opinions are
And-
worthwhile.
They have
And
purview over
the
the
fact
water.
that we are going to okay that design right near this source, or the high level, to me, it would warrant a peer review for that specific well.
It's not a high source, because it's not in the zone 2.
Doesn't meet the requirement, and that's why ComCon did not ask for a peer review.
If we were leaving that site alone, we wouldn't need a peer review. But because we might be putting an infiltration area directly upstream from it, it's the same case as 270.
So they don't take that into consideration in ComCon?
No,
at all?
they don't.
They don't?
No.
We
Well, that's the
we don't
disconnect
always
right
have
there.
the same.
Given the massive amount of wetlands behind that site, if you go by there, I would support Joel's idea, a concept for a peer review.
Well, if I can, so the Conservation Commission also works within the Stormwater Handbook in terms of their regulations, so.
I know you had a relationship with Peter, I heard that, and you
I
guys went
haven't
back.
worked with Peter for
I know,
30
but you
years.
guys have been in
Okay.
the business a long time.
No, but I have not talked to him in
I
30
know,
years.
but you guys have
Okay.
been doing it a long
Plus.
time, from what I
Okay,
understand.
Okay.
Not to call you
I know.
old, but you've been doing it a while. I
Okay, does
haven't.
anyone else have anything else besides that, and then we can circle back
I
around to
do,
this
because
particular question?
I mean, like I said, water's right there, and we're changing the use of that area. Right now, it's just, trees and shrubs and stuff like that. And the fact that putting in a building is gonna change with the stormwater, the direction, I think this merits a peer review.
We already went to the G. All right.
All right, well, we might as well just vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move that we submit this specific focus of I submit this to peer review with the specific focus of that monitoring well and potential impact of the infiltration on that result.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
What was it voted?
4 to 3. Opposed?
4 to 3 in favor?
4
Yes.
4 in favor, 3 opposed.
Okay, I will attempt to find a peer review consultant. Beta has informed us that they don't have the capacity to continue to provide services to the town. So if you have any suggestions, forward them to me. I'll work with the applicant to make sure there are no conflicts. My other suggestion is it may take an extended period of time based upon those challenges. In the meantime, you may want to initiate some meetings with the water districts and the Board of Health and the Concom, because nobody knows what anybody's reviewing. And to take the position that we have the legal authority to be independent, that's not how the town is presumably operating right now.
Does Beta have any if they're not
I
going to be able to provide support?
can ask them.
Yeah, please do.
But that delay in and of itself will likely be well over a month, just to find somebody. Never mind, get them under contract to do this work. But I'll initiate that.
Okay. Can you also initiate a letter to the requisite boards to try and find a date that we could have after the election, a couple joint meetings to kind of figure out what our lanes are?
I'll send an email out indicating that the planning board seems to be interested in convening a work session or a discussion of some sort.
Okay.
Any other questions for me? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
We have to
Move to continue
move
this
to continue the meeting.
Yes.
to April, no,
That's not even gonna be close, so we gotta kick it out, what'd you say, at least a month?
May,
I would say at
May,
least a month.
May, what was it, May,
23rd?
no. May 23rd?
Me.
May 8th.
May 8th? Okay.
I make a
I mean,
motion.
he doesn't think he's gonna be able to find anyone for a month, then they're gonna have to do the work, right?
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, you never know.
I suspect that the amount of work here isn't overwhelming.
Okay.
Make a motion to continue 93 Bricktown Road to May 8th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Okay. 191, where are we now? Chelmsford Street, the car wash.
So,
Closing the construction, sorry.
Beta, your traffic peer review consultant, should be with us on Zoom. Dennis Flynn is with us, and I believe is your, okay,
They're online, yep.
okay.
Proposing the construction of a new motor vehicle washing facility with associated site improvements. The site is located in the CB zoning district and consists of approximately 1.97 acres, as shown on Assessor's Map 63, Block 256, Lot 1. The applicant requests approval for special permits per Section 195.5 Use Regulations D15 for a motor vehicle washing facility, Section 195.73.5 to operate a car wash in the Aquifer Protection District, Section 195-74, and site plan review per Section 195-104 and any other relief deemed necessary.
Hello, good evening to the board. For the record, Casey Ferrera with Howard Stein Hudson. I do have online with me Krista Lucas, who did the traffic impact study from Howard Stein Hudson as well. So she will be available to answer questions should you have any. Before we kick into the traffic stuff, I did just want to address the last time we were here. There was a comment from the board about potentially planting larger caliper trees to try and mitigate a growth period to filling in. In some discussions with the landscape architect, this is not advisable, as the more the mature the tree is when you go to plant it, the harder it is for it to take to the area. So it'll actually end up stunting its growth over time. So if you plant a smaller tree, it'll grow much faster and fill in quicker. Then maybe the bigger tree will be bigger for a year, but then it'll stunt its growth and it'll be surpassed by the smaller tree. So while that is an option, we don't believe it would be the best option, at least for a few years down the road from now. I believe that was beyond traffic. That was the one outstanding item that I went home with homework for. So I don't know if we want to turn it over to the peer reviewer to have a little discussion on what they found, and then we can answer any questions or have a discussion from there.
That'd be great.
Excellent.
Dennis, you want to walk the board through your memo?
Yes, good evening. Dennis Flynn with Beta, as previously mentioned. So Yes, we were retained by the town, the planning board, to perform a peer review of the traffic impact study that was prepared by Howard Stein Hudson. We performed that review and issued a comment letter on March 22nd. And that was submitted to the town, and then I believe that was forwarded to Howard Stein Hudson, and then I believe it was yesterday, or I believe the date was March 25th. Excuse me. There was a response to our comments prepared by Howard Stein Hudson, and that was forwarded to us. So I wanted to sort of first start out by saying from a traffic and a transportation perspective. There was nothing really significant or critical that we were concerned with. However, we did have a handful of comments which Howard Stein Hudson did provide responses to, and overall, I felt that their responses were appropriate and by and large satisfied our concerns. So really, we only had about 5 comments, but I really just wanted to highlight for the sake of this discussion just about 3 of them. One of them, and I'll just start with just sort of in the order that they come in our letter. And the first one, I just requested some clarification as to why the nearby signalized intersection at Stedman and Golden Cove Road was not included as part of the study area. The response to that comment was more or less that there was sort of discussion amongst the planning board and planning staff to develop this study area, which was felt at that time not to include the signalized intersection. So looking, as a result of that, looking a little bit closer back at the expected trips that will be generated, from the car wash, it does appear that this really is going to be, a minimal amount of traffic expected to go towards that intersection. I think in the afternoon peak hour, it'd be about 1 car every 3 minutes. During the Saturday, about 1 car every 2 minutes. So, sort of the feeling there with that type of a trip or traffic generation, it really would be a very minimal impact to the signalized operations with that low of an additional demand. So because of that, I don't really have great concerns that there would be any operational or safety issues associated with, at that intersection associated with this development. The next comment I wanted to highlight was that car wash. So the data, obviously, that's utilized to determine the number of trips comes from the ITE trip generation manual. For whatever reason, the car wash really does not have a lot of studies that were conducted in the manual. So I did ask if you're consider looking at some empirical data from sites nearby, other car washes, sort of similar facilities. Howard Stein Hudson was able to provide a couple locations, one actually in, I believe it was Framingham, which includes some good actual counts and information from sites in Marlborough. I believe was one in Shrewsbury, and reviewing that and looking closer at those trips and those numbers, what they provided does look to be consistent with what this type of site will generate. So no concerns there. And then just finally, the last comment I had was really more related to that I want to highlight here was really more related to the site plan. Just given the location right now, the proposed driveway, I did ask them to consider if there was any feasibility to trying to shift the access driveway to be aligned with one of the driveways lined up directly across one of the driveways on the other side of the street that serves the daycare center. Recognizing that there certainly are some constraints and restrictions, which they did highlight. Just reading back through their comment that the proposed driveway location, or their response, I should say, to the comment, basically has been optimized based on internal site circulation concerns. The commercial use abutting, is abutting an existing residential facility. This does require a 30-foot landscape buffer that is highlighted on the site plan that was included in the study. And the driveway is basically located, has to be located, or is located just outside this required landscape buffer. And shifting the driveway to the south, to the southerly driveway is also not optimal, as it reduces the available distance to meet the evaluation, differential across the site. unless this, and then, complete site mirror, as they say, is impractical, as it preferred that the facility be closer, to the gas station, which is understandable, than the residential facility. So looking a little bit closer at it, obviously, anytime we can create a scenario where driveways are on opposite sides of the road are lined up, that is ideal, preferred. The one situation here that mitigates any sort of safety concern is that the driveways on the other side of the road for the daycare facility are not full service. Each one of them is an exit only, one of them is an entrance only. So that does mitigate any, sort of driver expectation concerns or any safety issues. The fact that they're not having all movements, served at both driveways, sort of having like a one-way circulation, I believe. So you'll have limited amount of traffic going either into, in the case of one driveway, or exiting. So that in my opinion or estimation, really mitigates any sort of safety concern there. Site distance is more than adequate, so that's not a concern. So, based on that, we don't have any significant concerns or critical concerns with the location of the driveway. So that was really it. Those were just the handful, just really 3 comments I wanted to highlight here and give my reaction to based on their responses for the board's consideration.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for, is it Brian?
Dennis.
Dennis, sorry, Dennis.
I got one question. Dennis, just in your opinion, with this facility being on this heavily trafficked, existing traffic road, how many more trips, can you just clarify, how many trips would this facility generate more than that's there already right now, in your opinion?
More than what's coming out of the existing site?
No, more than what's traveling down the street right now. I mean, we know the existing site is a single-family residence.
Right.
Do you think that a facility like this, how much trip generation will it attract?
So, in the afternoon, so in the afternoon, based on what we see with the ITE trip generation, what was provided in the traffic impact study, which also matches up very closely with the empirical data shared. This site's only going to generate about 51 new trips in the afternoon peak hours, or basically 26 vehicles turning in and 26 turning out. That does not rise to a level of a significant concern on my end. Frankly, that's less than 1 car a minute. Really is what that equates to. Saturday will be a little bit more, but the situation on Saturday, we also have to keep in mind, is the overall traffic demand is lower. So the adjacent roadway vehicle demand and operations, I should say, is less critical. So it's really not a significantly high amount of traffic. It does have high turnover. Vehicles are not there very long, similar to kind of like a drive-through operation. So, given those numbers and again, checking against, which was good that they were able to provide a little bit more backup there, just due to the limited amount of studies that have been done, it really looks like consistently within the region and the area, about that amount of traffic should be expected, which again is not, in my estimation, a significant increase.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions on comments 4 and 5. For Howard Stein Hudson, did you look at the empirical data from the other car wash? There are 2 car washes in the area. One's at a mobile station, which is a slightly different traffic pattern. But did you look at the traffic patterns of the other car wash down further?
Krista?
Right. So I'm Krista Lucas with Howard Stein Hudson. We did not. So when we got the scope for the traffic study, we had done the trip gen, but then we were asked to do counts at the daycare driveway and get an idea of what the roadway counts are. But we were not asked to get local. That was not suggested. And so we did do the industry standard that we had already done. We had provided that within the trip gen memo the first time. And so we absolutely can. We can go count more things. There were 3 sites of existing local car washes. Car washes are weather dependent. So there is that. And we do always try to count on a good day that it's not raining, because that's not the day you go to the car wash. So we're happy to do additional counts. Again, there are 3 sites within the ones that we provided in the response to comments. And so in Shrewsbury and in Marlborough, so they are suburban, they are typical, they're about the same size. So no, we did not count the mobile.
Okay, I'm confused because the ones in the response say Framingham and Middletown, Rhode Island.
Right, and so actually the data is in the appendix of that. And so there are 2 counts. Yeah, let's see, hold on, now I'm gonna pull it forward. So if you go to the appendix, and the data there is on PDF page 57. And so there are sites in Marlborough and Shrewsbury. Actually, it's Marlborough, Shrewsbury, and Framingham. So this is based on an MDM study.
Okay. I didn't see the Marlborough and Shrewsbury, but I saw the references to Middletown and Framingham. And
Yeah, so Middletown is I think the beta study.
Okay.
And then the Framingham this is the Framingham appendix. So for the Framingham, they asked the same question as, hey, what do other car washes look like? And the nice thing for Scrub-A-Dub in Framingham is they have other Scrub-A-Dub car washes. So they already have a service that they provide. And so these are comparable sites for them, both seasonally by month of the year, as well as days of the week.
Okay.
So both weekend and weekday, you give it by time of day, as well as how many what you can see what the peak months are. Some of these were during COVID, although we were home, so we could go get our cars washed. So I think the data itself, the time of day may be a little bit different during COVID, because but your work hours still remotely, we're still 9 to 5. So I think car washes were not impacted in the same way that other things would have been so much during COVID.
All right. I would have to go look at the Shrewsbury and Marlborough ones, but I'm a little concerned with comparing to Framingham, because Framingham.
Right. So the Framingham study used this supporting data from Marlborough and Shrewsbury.
But
so it's not using the Framingham site, it's using the Marlborough and Shrewsbury sites, which are giving just a litmus of, does this data from ITE seem accurate for similar car washes?
I get that, but my concern is that if it's similar to Framingham, it's likely dissimilar to ours, because Framingham is on Route 9, which is a divided highway. And so my concern with and that's why I'd have to go back to Marlborough and Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury's also Route 9.
Is it? Yeah, so my concern is that I would question the comparison of data between a car wash on a divided Route 9 highway and the traffic going to ours in Chelmsford on a 2-lane non-divided road.
Right, although Route 9 is 2 lanes in each direction, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So the volume going past even one way is still going to be, there's still going to be, the passing by, the access is still going to be similar in terms of volumes of vehicles. Yeah. It is going to be a right in, right out. But the demand, anyway, the roadway volumes should be.
Okay.
I don't know that Route 9, given that it's divided, means it's half as much traffic going to go there if it's twice as many lanes in the direction that's of travel. And that's an interesting theoretical to check, but again, and we're happy to count other ones, but mostly I think what Beta was asking is the data, are empirical sites consistent with what is being shown in ITE? Is ITE a good basis for this? And what we were trying to say is, yes, there are empirical sites that are consistent with ITE, and we do believe in the fitness of ITE data for this.
Okay. And then on comment 5.
And Dennis can jump in and say whether or not the concern is the roadway itself, of whether or not Chelmsford Road is so different, or whether or not it's our car wash is so different.
Right. If I may, yeah, that I certainly understand the comment being raised there about the functionality or the composition of the roadways. The one thing to keep in mind, in some cases, I think either the Marlborough or the Shrewsbury site may have even been a little bit higher than what IT is showing. Not significantly, but so thereby sort of saying that taking out the left turn access is not diminishing the demand to the site. And again, it was really because for whatever reason, the IT manual, which we rely on to help develop these numbers, does not really have a lot of data for whatever reason on car washes, just a handful of studies. So it was really okay, can we just see if we can check against actual sites to see if what IT is telling us is still reliable. We're not looking for an exact match, just something that is in a reasonable range. If nearby sites or adjacent sites are showing this, to be generating 3, 4, or 5 times more, then there maybe be a bit of a concern there. We want to revisit that or incorporate that into the evaluation. Since we're not seeing that, with these other sites that were provided, and raised a good point about the weather, and that was certainly a concern when we made this comment, was if they were going to try to get the empirical data now, they could be like, well, there's only 4 cars going to the car wash right now, because it's not quite ideal season. So it was a good piece of information to provide from a previous study that had empirical data that was provided or collected during a sort of a peak season, if you will, for car washes.
Okay, thanks. The question I had for you, Dennis, on comment 5, if the driveway, if the site was mirrored, would that improve the safety of that intersection with the daycare?
So it would, safety-wise, it's challenging to assess. It would just, our feeling is it would reduce what, I think, what we call sort of conflict points, and it would just enhance sort of the driver expectation, because they would be directly aligned from the driveway across from them, as opposed to a little bit offset. For a driveway of this low demand, as well as the ones across the street, and the fact that those driveways, one's an exit only, one's an entrance only. So any concerns of drivers turning and being sort of what we call caught off guard, or not expecting a movement coming out of the other driveway, or someone to be stopping to make a maneuver, is mitigated by that. So the ideal safest condition would be to have them aligned. However, I would not say that what's being proposed is unsafe. It's just anytime we can get a more ideal situation, we do request that be considered and looked at. But in this particular case, given all the factors that sort of just described, we don't have concerns that this is going to be leading to an unsafe, or the presence of this driveway is going to create an unsafe condition.
Okay. And Casey, I know you mentioned in the response that if you flip it, then you're kind of putting the car wash closer to the residence.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I was noticing as I was reading through this, though, is that if the site were mirrored and flipped, the building might also potentially act as a sound buffer from the vacuum components between the residents and...
So I started with the building on the top side,
Yeah.
when I first drew up a concept for this client. And when they went back through their operations and like an operational review of how the facility would function, they didn't like that an entrance on the southern side would be, the page southern side would be required to then take a left-hand turn into basically get into a parking lot area and then up and around to where the vacuums would be. Whereas essentially the drive-through would go straight But if for some reason, here, it's kind of easier too.
Yeah.
So the current operation would be anybody coming in can take this immediate right-hand turn, right? If for some reason it were flipped, they would have to take a left-hand turn, which could be blocked off by outgoing traffic, causing traffic jams at the entrance, meaning that the operation circulation wouldn't work efficiently. So while I did start with that after their operational review, they basically requested that we find any other way to make the entrance movements be right-hand turn.
Okay. Okay.
Is there a fence at all? Like a,
There's an existing fence, yeah.
what kind of fence?
Stockade.
I'm sorry?
Stockade fence.
How
I
high?
believe it's 8 feet, but it could be 6. I believe it's on the residential property, the Chelmsford Crossing property.
Okay. And do we have a limitation on when the vacuums can be run? Like operation, what are the?
Well, we're doing traffic right now.
Not under zoning. We don't regulate hours of operation under zoning. We regulate noise. You could include it as a condition.
The hours.
Yeah, and I think they
I thought we
provided
did.
hours of operation.
7
we
to
not?
7, is that it?
In the
I
summer.
believe it's 7 to 7 in the winter and then 7
7
to
to
8
8
in the summer.
And that includes the vacuums.
Yeah, same time.
Correct.
Okay, I thought we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I had heard that the vacuums could be used 24/7.
No, there's going to be no attendant on the site.
Okay.
Okay, so, hours.
Any more traffic questions?
7 to 7.
What's that?
Any more traffic questions? We got the beta guy here.
Anyone else have anything else for traffic?
I don't.
Okay.
So we can say goodnight to Dennis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing, so we're still up.
Okay, so now we have, I believe, next up, a public hearing on this development, unless there's anything else we need to do first.
No, open it up.
I will update you that we went to Concom last night, and just briefly, I do have some operation and maintenance items to work out with the commission, but one of their requests last night was why there was no landscaping along that rear berm that goes down to the wetland. And just to address that, all the landscaping we did was mostly for aesthetics and to replace trees that we were taking down. We wanted to dress up the facility. One of their requests was if we could add trees back there, it could help buffer noise from 495 and whatnot. And speaking, I spoke today with my landscape architect, and because that's a steep slope, it wouldn't be able to accommodate trees that would ever get big enough to buffer noise. What we could propose there would be kind of low-level shrubbery or kind of grasses that would hold together the slope, so their function would mostly be slope stabilization, but it wouldn't really do anything for noise. So really, as far as the function of creating a buffer for noise, we wouldn't be able to do anything on the rear.
What about fencing?
Fencing along the rear.
For noise along 495?
But the highway.
495 is about
the highway goes
400
higher.
feet behind the site.
No, I know, I grew up
much
in the
higher.
neighborhood,
Yeah,
I know.
Right,
And when you
much-
take down a tree, it really does affect the noise level in the neighborhood. I know this for a fact. And so that is a concern, is the noise from, those trees in there now are protecting most of that neighborhood from 495 noise. So we just need to try to figure out how we can help that.
So we could propose a fence along the rear driveway that would go kind of, I guess it would replace the railing that we have along the retaining wall in the back, and then just run it along the, kind of along that rear driveway going straight across the site, if that would be
Might
something
help
that
with-
you believe.
With the issue of, PFAS. And you know how we were talking about chemicals being stolen. Another barrier might be nice, too, to protect the wildlife.
How many trees are coming down?
58.
And how many are you planning on planting?
Between trees and shrubs, 183.
You're taking 58 down, and
Correct.
how many trees are you planting?
Trees are going up are, the big ones between the landscape buffers would be 20, and then shrubs 163. Or, yeah, sorry, that's correct, 163.
Do you have break down trees to shrubs?
Trees to proposed?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, trees 20, shrubs 163. And we've lined the majority of the trees along the required buffers, the 30-foot side yard buffer, and then the 10-foot front against Chelmsford Street.
I'd be okay with that fence in the back to help.
It may help. There are more trees down towards the waterway that they're not touching.
Because you've
There
got,
is, I mean,
It doesn't help with sound.
the from
some.
It's not gonna help anything.
It won't help at all, Mike?
No, because the highway's higher and the fence is only gonna be 6 or 8 feet. It's gonna
Yeah.
come right over it.
Yeah.
But also, there is still 400 feet of wooded wetlands, riverfront area that go to the highway. So while we're taking down 58 trees, there's still an entire woodlands and forest behind the site that is still going to remain untouched.
And you've got some trees in the front of the property too.
Right, spaced per the requirement on the landscape requirements.
In the building.
Okay.
We'll never solve the highway
I
problem.
would like to invite the public. People have been waiting a long time.
Hi, my name's Joanne Anderson. I'm a Precinct 6 town meeting representative, and I live on Evergreen Street, which is off of Chelmsford Street near Dalton Road. I looked over this as much as I could anyways. I was wondering, can you guys bring up Appendix A?
Appendix A is in?
Appendix A.
What document? Traffic?
Yes. And the reason I'm asking for that is because I noticed it's like towards the beginning. I noticed that where they did that, it's a weekday total and no weekend total. And I also noticed that your peer reviewer said less people drive on 110. It's towards the beginning of it, like, keep going. The Appendix B, keep going. Oh, that, down one. There you are. So you can see how this says specifically time period weekday, and between the hours of like 9 a.m. and if you go down further to about 7 p.m., it's greater than 7%. I know all of us, first of all, it's only a weekday. They didn't do a Saturday. I'd really like to see what a Saturday would look like for traffic, because all of us live in this town. And I don't know about you, but I can't take a left out of my street on a Saturday. I basically have to take a right onto Chelmsford Street, and I usually go all the way down to 495 to get onto Route 3, because to take a left out of my street on a weekend, and sometimes even during the week, especially in the afternoon, is near impossible. But taking a left doesn't matter, because the car wash is to my right on Chelmsford Street. But I just noticed that. I would like to see a weekend traffic, because I totally don't agree with the person who's saying there'd be less traffic on Saturday.
What street did you say you lived
I live on Evergreen, which is right where, if you're on Chelmsford Street and right where Dalton Road is, mine's the little street right, like you take a sharp right to get on down Mine Street, or a lesser right to go down Dalton Road. So I'm not in front of or by the car wash per se, I'm like a half a mile back.
Closer to Market Basket.
Yeah,
Closer to Market
closer to
Basket.
Market Basket.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, just looking at that, I was surprised that they didn't take a weekend. And I was looking at the numbers of that Shrewsbury and Marlborough, or wherever it was, and the peak ones where they had numbers of like 400. I would really hope we don't have a day where there'd be 400 extra cars on 110. I did notice that, you guys have already brought it up, that Route 9 is not comparable to 110, completely different roads. And people do take rights and lefts onto 110. People can't take rights and lefts onto Route 9. It's a different type of street. So, and I think the other big thing is that needs to be brought up, has nothing to do with traffic, but We're all being told that our sewerage is maxed out. How did we take into consideration the water and sewerage use of a car wash? That is within, what, a mile of 2 other car washes? That's my other thought, and that's all I have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bob Myers. I live at 7 Pine Hill Avenue, which is kind of a stone's throw away from the gas station, which is next to the proposed car wash. I saw a picture of the proposed structure, and it seems to have a 4-sided tower attached to the building. Is that correct? Do you know the height of that tower?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
I have it up.
Elevations on that, Evan?
I don't see any measurements.
If we look at it, could we estimate about 40 feet?
28,
28 feet?
I would guess.
Okay, so
35.
It has to be under 35 by zone.
okay, so it's taller than a single-family home by a certain amount?
No,
No,
no.
about the same height?
They take the mean of so it's 35 feet, it's the mean. So there's roofs in town that are higher than 35 feet, and there's some that are less than 35 feet.
Okay, and this one is 28?
Just guessing, I'm
We're
guessing.
gonna find out.
25.7, thank you. Will there be lighted signs near the top of that tower structure?
Just the logo of the car wash,
Will that be on all sides?
just where shown.
Okay, so one side of the car wash, facing the gas station or facing away from the gas station? Facing the highway, 495, or facing 110?
Chelmsford Crossing.
Facing the elderly complex. Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the structure. It's very modern in design. Some would say unappealing. That's a matter of taste. I've noticed that in some towns, when you look at a structure like the gas station, it's, early 1960s, it's kind of ugly, the era of leisure suits and whatnot. I've noticed a lot of towns have kind of put the kibosh on that kind of construction, that they've required more traditional-looking structures. And you can tell the difference when you drive into a town that's restricted modern architecture.
This is the third version. We've sent them back 3 times to come up with this, and we are pretty much all in agreement that this is acceptable. You should have seen the first one.
Yeah, I think I did see the first one because the tower looked taller and had a flat roof.
It was rounded, it was like a half.
Yeah, no,
dome.
one was flat, well, one was flat.
Yeah, then the
That was
next
awful.
one.
Okay, so I must have looked at one of the prior
I think
iterations.
what we asked them to do is to try to match maybe like the Jean D'Arc Credit Union look, is what we were looking for, right?
Right, yes.
We actually picked that building out. So this was a compromise already.
Okay, thank you. Okay. With regard to the water usage, I'm trying to figure out the difference between the water usage and the sewer usage. I'm seeing 1,000 gallons per day thrown about and then 2,700 gallons per day. I don't know which is water usage or which one is sewer usage. I would have thought they would both be kind of the same. 2,700, okay. And I believe Mr. Ferrera mentioned at the Conservation Commission meeting last night that town of Chelmsford as a whole has 9,000 gallons per day available approximately.
As of a few months ago.
Okay. And that's for the entire town of Chelmsford. Our excess capacity is 9,000 gallons per day. Is that correct?
I don't think the planning board is going to be able to answer that
I
question.
don't have that, I don't have that.
The planning board doesn't control the wastewater system or flows that are provided to any particular development.
Would you agree that the Conservation Commission number presented of 9,000 gallons per day is approximately correct?
Likely to be correct, yeah.
So it seems like we're devoting about 1/3 of our entire town's available sewage capacity to this one car wash project.
It's 9,000 after this project and all the others you've heard tonight.
And that 9,000, based on Christine Clancy's presentation to the select board, may go up or down, fluctuate, depending on how much sewer capacity they can keep reclaiming based on their work.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that 1/4 of the town's capacity will be used up by this project?
No.
No.
No, that's not right.
3,000 gallons per day out of 15,000 gallons or 12,000 gallons per day of current availability, assuming the 9,000 is what's left over after the 3,000 per day?
I don't think the 9 is the starting point for this project. The number was higher when this
I thought it
project
was
first came
22,
in.
I don't recall 22,000 comes in my head right now.
And that's my point, is that the numbers
And
changing.
she wasn't even clear on that.
Yeah,
to
I
be
know.
honest.
The number's changing because they're continuing to look for infiltration that they can
They have
continue
catch
to.
basins that work.
And in any case, that's really outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The town cannot pick and choose.
right.
They can't reserve capacity for particular
Another
developments.
project.
As projects come in, if capacity is available,
Yeah, that's the answer, really.
Now, at one point, maybe about 4 years ago, Chelmsford was already at sewage capacity.
We've been
It's an
up and
issue.
down.
We've been, yeah, we're at capacity. I mean, that's not, I mean, we're,
It varies, but basically on the rainfall lately.
Yeah, they're seeing infiltration with the high rainfall. That's where we're exceeding our output.
Yeah, then when it's
But that's-
We're
dry.
trying to mitigate
but
that
that's
now with
different
a.
than,
Now, I thought our sewers and storm drains were separate pipes.
they are.
They are,
They
but
are.
there's,
So,
But there's infiltration is what they're thinking, and they're gonna do a smoke test, there's a whole thing. If you were to reach out to the DPW,
Yeah.
they can explain it a lot better than I can.
We
to be
don't
quite honest
really
with you.
know.
okay.
We go
So-
based on the DPW's recommendation for stormwater
Right.
capacity.
I see.
And so if they approve it, it's okay for stormwater and
So
not
estimates-
stormwater, but sewer capacity.
So we don't consider those questions?
Okay, so the estimates of how much sewer capacity we do or do not have can't be answered here.
Correct.
So we're somewhere between 0 capacity available and 20,000 gallons per day.
Yes, that's a.
yeah.
We look to DPW to tell us if there's capacity for a project.
Okay. For an entire municipality,
Yeah.
having in excess of 20,000 gallons sounds like we're at capacity.
We don't permit based on that. That's outside of our jurisdiction. I understand your point.
Yeah.
And I listened to some presentation just the other day. Actually, it was, is the Tuesday select board meeting
Paul
yesterday.
Cohen explained it.
And it was, it depends on how much rainfall you got that month, whether we're over or under. It's really quite remarkable.
Do we have that much infiltration?
Yes,
in a-
we do, and it
Do.
turns out it's largely through the manholes.
And some pumps.
And some
And
pumps.
some
The some
pumps. So
pumps
there's
is
a
the other
program
place.
right now, say a commercial development is over their capacity, they can buy into a program, and that money's being used to go fix the issues that
Like
they're
the sump
catching.
pumps and-
Like sump pumps and catch basins and the smoke test.
You know what, I
So we
think
are-
we're off.
Yeah, but
We did get off
that's,
track a
that's a
little
little bit of the answer for you.
Okay, so we are going to open up a new water-intensive business in town just down the street
Well-
from another car wash. Seems like we've got
That's, yeah.
kind of a lot of car washes piling
We
up.
don't,
We don't pick the
build
businesses.
developments.
We don't pick them.
Developments are brought to us for permitting, and we assess their appropriateness
On
with
individual
regards to the
basis.
zoning code.
Understood. The planning board also takes an interest in the development of the town overall, quality of
And
life
it-
of the
and it-
town,
sure,
traffic,
absolutely.
all of these things
Yep.
are under your consideration. So I hope you'll
Absolutely.
take my comments and
Absolutely.
consider that when,
Well, that's where we start fiddling with the zoning bylaws,
yeah.
which is our, kind of our other hat.
Yeah. So now that we are making exceptions for this lot, which was
Well-
single-family zoned residential, changed years ago to a mixed-use
Actually,
kind of
it's
zone.
it's zoned commercial.
I believe CB.
Single family was not supposed to be there. Town meeting wanted commercial development there.
Okay, so I think I've brought up everything that I have to say. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Laurie Myers, 7 Pine Hill Avenue. After reading the traffic report and listening to the presentation, I feel like it is a disservice to the Westlands neighborhood. You know, the competing, the competing exits and entrance for the car wash and the daycare. If there was no traffic on Route 110 and they were the only people trying to get out, that would be one thing. There is constantly traffic on Route 110. Not only that, there's no sidewalk on the daycare side. So the parents who live in the neighborhood and walk to get their kids have to maneuver across a lawn onto 110, and now they're going to be competing with the cars coming in and out of the car wash, and the additional traffic on Route 110. So I think there should be another traffic study. It should also take into account the accidents on Route 129 and on Golden Cove, on Stedman Street, and Route 110. The emergency calls over to the hotel, multiple emergency calls. Same thing with the assisted living. I went over.
Sorry, same thing with what?
The assisted living. There were many
Ambulance visits.
emergency calls over to the assisted living. I think the thing that really stands out to me, I spoke about some issues with hazardous waste and planning that I know Casey is working on at the Concom meeting. But I think the other thing that stands out is the trees. You know, I get this has to be placed on this, you know, the size of this lot, but the trees coming down, and I understand they're trying to work on that. But, you know, when you take down 58 trees, and that's a busy highway behind there, and it's loud, and we still have to live there. You know, I get this is a by right business, but come on.
It's two highways.
Right. You know, it's loud. So whatever can be done to protect that neighborhood would be greatly appreciated. I don't think I have anything else. Let me look at my notes here. That's it. I do think, I'm going to close with, I do think there should be another traffic study. To look at that, you know, that Route 110 area as a whole. And I just don't think the one that was done is adequate. Thank you.
Debbie Deary, Precinct 6 Rep. I live at 19 Stedman Street, and I did get a letter as being in about it. I listened to the traffic. I don't know what to say. I lived there for 49 years. And it was strange. The other day after the last meetings, I remembered that we had a town clerk that was in that intersection of 110, turning, and someone went through a red light coming from 110, where this car wash is supposed to be. And I thought about it because I was in the left lane to turn onto Stedman Street, and I had a green light, but there was a car coming. And the light, I was already in the intersection, and I looked, and the light turned red. And there I was, with no place to go. It flew, and that reminded me about the town clerk that was in that intersection that got pushed from that intersection to the on-ramp of 495. She died, by the way. It was the town clerk at the time. And it reminded me of that because I was praying. And every day I come home, in my driveway, although I didn't say it the last time, I say a prayer. And I say, thank you, God, for getting me in this driveway. Because we have more trucks than ever in our area. When they were doing the River Right No project, I went to those meetings. I don't live on that street. The only one that lives down there is my husband at Pine Ridge, to be honest with you. But I went to those meetings because when they started talking about warehouses, I said, it will affect my area. It affects all of Chelmsford, not one area of Chelmsford, all of Chelmsford. That daycare center, my grandson from years ago, he's now 19, he was young. My daughter was stuck on Route 3. She said, Ma, will you go after Connor? I said, it's 10 minutes to 6. I said, I'll be lucky if I get there. Do you know it took me 10 minutes from my house, and I live at the bottom of Stedman Street, to get to a daycare center that I could throw a rock. I see all night. The lights are on all night long in that daycare. I could throw a rock, but I couldn't because of the fence, so I had to get in the car. And you know, that's how bad it is in our area. That intersection, I remember one day, not long after, the River Neck Road, there was at least 20 engineers standing at the intersection of 110 and Golden Cove. They were all standing there with hard hats, looking at the intersection. Now, where is that information? How many accidents? About 15 years ago, I was doing research for the area. We had the largest, from Chelmsford Street and Lowell, where the underpass is, to right into the center on 110. That was the second largest traffic area for accidents in the town of Chelmsford. And the number one was Drum Hill. Now, I don't think things have really changed that much. But I'll tell you, when you sit there and the light's yellow and they're coming down, because that's one thing you haven't mentioned. It's a slope coming down. It's a small hill coming down. They fly. They're not going to wait for the next green light. And I know it. I live it every single day. And there's certain times of the day I try not to even leave my house because they don't want to let you out of the traffic. And when you try to get into your driveway, I put my direction on 2 houses prior to. You don't have any choice. And they slam on their horns. They're mad at me because I live there. It really is kind of comical, you know. You sit there and say, okay, but I live here.
That is a bad intersection.
It is.
I think it's a class 7, is that what they called it in the traffic study? Like the worst possible intersection.
And
they are studying it right now, I believe.
Well,
right?
somebody should be.
There's a state study going on right now to resolve the issues at that intersection, correct?
That in combination with a new light at the off-ramps.
Yeah, there's going to be changes coming.
Yes, well, that off-ramp light, that was supposed to be done about 6 or 7 years ago,
Yeah.
but they never got around to it. I was aware of that also,
Yeah, there's a new study going on.
because it just backs up on 495.
They just put a rotary in Lexington. If you drive to Lexington now, they like rotaries. Just put it that way. They like rotaries, and they work. They work. Picture a rotary.
Yeah, just like Drum Hill.
Yeah.
No rotary.
But,
Roundabout.
yeah.
The most-
We get your general point. It's very
The
dangerous.
problem
when we're
is
having traffic
that-
in your mind.
How do you explain to someone we're putting people's lives in danger? Tonight, around dinner time, it was around 6:30, there was the sirens again. And where did they go? They went to the assisted living. I know my in-laws were living at Meadow Lodge. They will not, without a police officer there, they have to have a police officer there in case they're abused. And then you have the fire truck, and then you had the ambulance. My father-in-law had slipped on the floor. And everybody just showed up, and because they don't pick them up. That's one of the rules. And they wanted to take him. He said, there's nothing wrong. I just slipped off the chair. He refused to go because it was a rug. My point is, we listen to sirens all day long. And it seems as though the freight trucks, that's another thing. By law, the trucks are not allowed on Chelmsford Street past the underpass to go into the city alone. They're not allowed to continue onto Chelmsford Street. The trucks are not allowed on North Road, supposedly, but they are. They're taking Smith Street to get to Parkhurst Road, and then they're crossing onto North.
Okay.
Not productive.
Thank
what,
you.
what I'm saying
Thank you,
is
Debbie.
It's not productive to what we're dealing with.
all right, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But we're getting a lot of freight trucks,
No, the select board, definitely.
and we are. So I don't have the answers. As far as the daycare center goes, to pull out of there, to take a left-hand turn, to go to that intersection, I don't know how they're going to do it. From my kitchen window on Saturday morning, the traffic is all stopped going up Chelmsford Street.
Thank you, Debbie.
So,
Real quick, I reached out to all of you, most of you, sorry, Deirdre, I think you're new answering machine, but I just want to say thank you for everyone who called me back. Evan's been very responsive, all of you have, so I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. You guys have had some long meetings, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can ask whatever you want. That's a state road, though.
I do want to clarify a couple things if I could. I just wanted to mention some of the comments that were earlier about Appendix A. I just want to clarify that that wasn't the traffic, those were not the traffic counts of that area. That was the trip generation counts that are standard from the industry for a car wash. The traffic counts for that area were in the main traffic report. That is a different document. But the traffic counts were counted on weekdays. We gave specific times for the morning commute and the daycare pickup and the afternoon commute, and it was also done on weekends. So it was done on the Saturday as well. So I just want to clarify that based on an earlier.
And those were like percentages of how it gets used
Yeah,
typically.
yeah, that
Car
Appendix A
wash.
is.
It's like 10%.
How a car wash is distributed throughout the day as an industry standard. It wasn't actual counts based on the site.
I just have a question for the applicant. Just because, something that the neighbors had brought up. Is it possible to have them put in a sidewalk on the other side by the daycare?
Does
Along
it-
that side? Is there no
Will it
sidewalk?
connect to an existing sidewalk?
Do we have any that go up?
So that intersection's so dangerous.
To connect it to
The
Stedman?
sidewalk's on the project side, I believe, right?
Yes.
Correct, we are
Nothing on the other side.
rebuilding a sidewalk on our side.
And that's a state road, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So state would have to-
Anything done.
But can we do something so it connects to Stedman, at least it's on, like, the neighborhood side for them?
They'll be contributing, it's either 100 or your new fee per parking space, which the town can then use for geographic traffic improvements in the area.
But would we be able to do it on 110?
In partnership with the state.
You have to do a state study like we're doing up at Vinyl Square.
And they're doing that on 110 too right now. Is that study started, the state study?
110.
She saw 28 engineers out there.
Yeah, that's probably what
I know,
you
but
saw.
like by the time,
That-
by
that-
the
those was-
time, right.
That was
by the
Department of
time everything ever
Transportation. was
happens,
that.
it'll be,
No, the redesign of Vinyl Square is
Keep
5
getting
years
his
scheduled, so
Right,
this would be
right.
5 years out.
like, I'm
easy.
still waiting for my sound barriers on 495, which they approved in 1988. So I'm like, I don't know, like, we wait for them to figure this out.
So it might be worth noting as well that after, or if we receive local approvals, we do still have to permit through the state for our curb cut and for any actions that we're going to take within the right-of-way. So there is still an opportunity for input from the state for what they'd like to see within their right-of-way. We can't just propose things within their right-of-way without.
And see if
kind
they're
of approaching
studying that area right now. That would help.
they are.
Are you able to propose to them things that?
Propose sidewalks on the opposite side.
Yes, on the neighborhood side.
The
yeah.
last time I attempted something similar to that. They shot it down because there was no valid or safe connections either across the street or directly connecting to
That's
it.
why I asked if there was any sidewalks on that
So I
side.
believe the sidewalk ends at the intersection with Stedman, so there's where it wraps around 110. I believe there's a sidewalk that starts for Stedman there. I could be wrong, but so that would be where it would have to go to.
Right, like that would be, because let me tell you, like, you know,
I see people standing there.
that intersection is deadly. Like, no one should be crossing, like, no one should be crossing it to get anywhere.
It's not the applicant's fault or anybody else's fault.
Yeah, but, yeah.
It's just the layout of the
Okay.
highways.
Do we have anyone else from the public that wanted to speak? And if not, I will take a motion.
What are we doing at this point? Traffic, presumably traffic was the last item.
Yeah.
Everything else
I think it's
seemed to
time for us to
be
vote on this.
resolved.
Close the public
We don't really have a sense as to whether traffic is resolved. The only reason you would close the public hearing is if you believe you have all the relevant information you need to make an informed decision based upon your zoning provisions. If you choose to continue the hearing,
we do.
you need to articulate what additional information, if any, you need from the applicant.
I think based on what I remember yesterday from Concom, they're still open pending updates to the O&M and long-term prevention plan.
Weren't they gonna work on that off?
Yeah, so I actually saw Peter offline today. And
They left it where they keep the hearing open so that they can review the decision while the hearing is open. This board also seems to have a similar, so if you want to keep the hearing open, but everything seems to be resolved, you're not asking for any more information.
Well, I guess I have,
Asking staff to draft a decision, that makes
That's
sense.
what we need.
I have a point of clarification that I'd like to make, which I think it's a very good point, and I guess I'll have to go back with a closer eye to the traffic study about whether and to what extent the specific nature of the surrounding structures was considered specifically emergency vehicle volumes to the assisted living, the hotel.
I doubt it.
You can't do that.
I doubt it.
The emergency vehicles go to every home in this town.
Random.
And you cannot put a study against how many, I mean, just because there's a assisted living facility that's a neighbor here, that should not impact this
Yeah, I
applicant.
would-
I mean, that's my opinion.
I would agree with
I
that.
don't
I
know if you
agree
guys
with
agree
Mike,
with that.
totally.
Based on what I've been reading about the IT traffic stuff, and the traffic engineer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that type of data would exist.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't.
I mean, I don't think there's anything, this whole area is tough traffic.
Yeah. And
In the way I look at the way this business is gonna operate, the way I get a car wash, it's spur of the moment.
yeah,
I don't plan to go to the myself, I'm just talking for myself. I'm already on the road, I'm just pulling in, getting a car wash and getting out of there. So like trip generation, I don't know if they even take that into
I
account.
don't know, I'm different, though. I actually, like, plan it. Like,
Yes, everybody's
I don't
different,
have a
so
lot of
everybody's different. I
time,
get
so
that. I'm not
I would be the
surprised.
extra
Okay,
car
More
that
of
would go
a
down.
impulse item for me.
Okay.
And I kind of gonna go ahead and jump in on the emergency access. It sounds as though the issue is concern for emergency access vehicles accessing places that have a call into them. And by rules of the road, everybody should be yielding to those anyway. So regardless of how many calls there are, that's gonna be more of an enforcement issue. And honestly, that's the one thing that I think still in Massachusetts works traffic-wise, is people pulling over. There's enough width on Chelmsford Road with the shoulders that as long as both sides go, and anyone who's done, like you've watched them go, they'll go up the middle if they need to. So I think in terms of emergency response time and the impact that the car wash is going to have to emergency response time along this corridor, I do not think that that's a concern based on the actual rules of the road. The way that emergency response responds, the fact that they are big trucks, they have sirens, they honk, they make it very clear that no, you should be out of the way now.
yeah.
I mean, traffic studies are fun. I mean,
Okay.
you can go
Okay,
I think we ought to close it and vote.
okay.
second. We
Take a
gotta close the-
motion.
We gotta close the public hearing.
Okay, you want to move that?
So, I would rather keep it open until next meeting when we see the O&M plan and the long-term pollution prevention.
Well, and have the decision written up so that you can still
Yeah.
review the decision. if you
Oh,
have
that,
a
so
question.
we'll be ready to go next time.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing, we should do the same thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
That's kind of what I was
Aren't they
thinking.
waiting
No,
for-
that's the right
aren't they
way to
waiting
go.
for our decision?
No.
No,
No.
they're separate, they're all separate.
Right.
They
so-
just want to make sure that you won't have future changes that's going to then affect them.
Yeah.
No, Chris
That's
is
what they're
right, we're
concerned
putting the
about.
cart before the horse. So we have to continue.
So we would continue to next meeting, but start drafting
We
the
don't
decision.
necessarily have to do that. No, we can, if we wish, and we have done this before, vote to close this, vote on the item, and then approve the draft when we get it as a
Yeah, I don't
separate
like
action.
doing that.
Well, we've done it, it's been done that way on this board for many, many years.
Yep.
We're
And
we're
not
all here, we're
recently.
all voting members. I tend to agree with Mike.
I
We have
don't
a full
really care
board
one
right
way or the
now.
other.
It could change, that's all I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we want to close as much as we can.
But until we see the last draft of the O&M plan and the long-term pollution
Do we think
prevention
there's
plan,
anything that's gonna come out of that that would change?
There
any
might
of-
be.
Change any of our minds? That's all I'm gonna ask.
Oh, no, it's not about changing minds. It's about making sure that we have the language
Appropriate
correct.
Oh, yeah, it's
Because
really-
if we want to discuss it, we can't with a closed hearing.
Well, I mean, especially if you're
can always
working
open the
through,
hearing
if you're working through your conditions and then you realize you have a question, which is not unexpected because you're going through details like you hadn't gone through them before. For the decision, if you have a question, you need to ask somebody. If you've closed the hearing, then you either have to open it for that particular question, which.
Which you
that
can't
could
do
become-
without
which you
posting it
can't do
either.
without Posting it,
I
so.
know you guys are good,
it's
but
just easier.
I kinda rely on Concom anyway in this regard, what we're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
Because that's our biggest concern, is the water, right?
But
You have a
actually,
member on Concom who believes that the car wash is a higher potential for problems to stormwater.
And that's why he's asking
There's no
for the.
evidence of that, but.
He's the
but
one that
that's-
asked for the.
He wants to
changes.
peruse the O&M plan and customize it.
but for this project and for a couple others, we've provided some input to the O&M plan, as have they.
Yeah.
So until we see what it is,
All right.
and the problem with, if we close it tonight,
I'm sure we're all.
see
gonna
the
be
O&M
here.
plan, we would have to reopen the hearing, which we can't do spur of the moment, we would have to post it again.
You can close the public hearing part of it and then leave our hearing still open.
Yeah.
For just our conversation as a board.
We're done
No
taking
longer
public input.
Right.
You're allowed to deliberate
You're allowed to
You're allowed to
deliberate.
deliberate.
and
So we wouldn't
discuss
make a
the
decision.
But we
would just
can't
close public
ask
hearing.
questions.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unless they're.
That's my point.
Pretty much.
And it has happened on a few occasions where the applicant, was asked and applicant responded when the public hearing had been closed. So I just want to try to avoid that, I think.
All right, do we have a motion to continue the public hearing, maybe?
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing till April 10th?
Should be quick, so we can.
10th, April
That should be
10th.
quick.
Second.
All in favor?
May I suggest also that we ask for a draft decision?
Yes.
Yes.
And, because we may be able to just wrap that all up in one shot. Good.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.
Send
Have a
that
great
out
night.
to us, Evan?
Yes.
And then I'm assuming we'll get the draft O&M and long-term as soon as it's ready?
I asked Peter, let me know as soon as he was available, so waiting on that availability.
Thanks.
When's the Conservation Commission's next
9.
meeting?
The 9.
And our meeting's on the 8th?
Ours on 10th.
10th.
Yeah.
But we have another meeting on the 8th. We got 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah, we got a busy week.
I'm supposed to be skiing, they got a foot of snow, and I'm gonna be down here.
Well, maybe you won't get elected and you won't have to go.
Don't
True.
say that.
Pass the buck.
Okay.
Especially the MBTA thing. Oh my God.
What's that?
That'll be a nightmare.
Yep, ADUs.
ADUs.
Okay.
So I asked for this to be put on the agenda I mean, from the select board meeting the other night.
Yep.
I was first under the impression that it was going to be a joint meeting where we would be discussing the bylaw.
That's what I thought too.
And,
were
and learning
expecting a
more about
report.
it. They were expecting a report from us on a decision one way or the other.
Yeah,
But
so
we
it
hadn't
works,
had a
it works
meeting.
out, it works out.
We hadn't had a meeting.
So we haven't had a
and-
meeting yet.
All right, so we can
So-
discuss now.
We need to discuss this and then make a recommendation to the select board coming out of this meeting tonight.
Okay.
So that we can, as a combined boards, reach out to our politicians
Yeah.
amongst other things.
My biggest concern is the home ownership part of it, and that's the biggest one I have.
Homeowners private, homeowner property.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine, and then you can rent it to whoever you want, but as long as you're on that property.
So I have a couple
Right.
questions on it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So you're saying right now, it's not, the way it's written right now, there's no home ownership? Like,
Yeah,
any-
the,
any-
not
the
required.
fear is developer comes in, buys a single family, builds the second house, moves out and rents them both.
We're not the only community backlash. They're gonna get a lot of letters, put
Well,
it this
people
way.
don't know about it. That's
So-
my concern.
Right, and this is for every single
So maybe we
community.
could promulgate our
It's
combined
everybody.
letter to
So
the
it's
Lowell
totally
Sun.
different than MBT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
So
Maybe we promulgate our combined letter to the Lowell Sun and/or the Boston Globe
there
or
you go.
something.
we're not writing the letter. Our recommendation is going to the select board. The chairman of the
Yeah,
select
yeah,
board is sending the letter.
she's writing the
We
letter.
can write a joint letter.
We can also,
You go
as
right
a
away.
planning
Double
board,
point.
reach out to every other planning board to
Right.
inform them of this.
I
They should know it's coming
think
by
it's
now.
pretty
Yeah,
safe
can we
to
ask
say
the,
that they know.
someone from the public to come up and talk?
Not yet. I
All
got
right,
some
all right.
questions about the actual bylaw.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about that.
Yes.
So it talks in here about accessory dwelling unit on the first page of whatever this attachment is, because this is not really formally the bylaw.
That's like definitions, I think.
Under the,
That's
under the
part of
definition, it says,
150-page
it
bylaw.
says, subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements. So does that fall under the town setbacks?
Yeah.
Yes.
From
It has to.
Another structure and side yard setbacks?
It would either be based upon existing or newly adopted if the article, if the bill passes and it becomes law. The town would have the ability to adopt reasonable regulations specific to,
ADUs.
So we would change our setbacks?
you could, yes.
Here's the fundamental question.
No, it says right here.
Would
subject
not
to.
changing any setbacks be considered reasonable?
No.
Given how the state's been acting about
Lately, I
MBTA,
don't know the
no.
answer to
No,
that.
but here's the thing, right, because it's a
Yeah.
minimum lot size of 5,000
No,
square
there's
feet.
a reason why we have that. It's a
So how could, like, our setbacks that we have for
I think
an
they all
acre
stand.
lot work for 5,000 square foot?
Well, they wouldn't. You couldn't do
But
something.
like, that's what,
And I'm afraid of an argument that says, okay, that makes it unreasonable, where our setbacks were reasonable before the law passed. That's what I worry about here.
Right.
like, first of all, every town, we already have ADU zoning in each
Yeah.
town, right? Like,
To some degree, yeah.
we all have it, we can add more to it, we can, I mean, Lowell last year, put it up and went up to vote, and they got put down by the citizens of Lowell, right?
Now it
They
can
have
be a
the choice.
standalone unit now, though, that's the difference.
I get it, but we, like, it's
That's
town
right.
zoning,
No
it's, like, we're
relative-
elected by the residents
Doesn't have
of
to
this
connect,
town.
no connection.
And the fact that, to me, the fact that the state is telling how each town should be, like, I don't think that's right.
But it,
No,
they
I don't
still,
think it
you
is
still
either.
have to,
Nobody
Evan,
does.
correct me if I'm wrong, how many actual lots would get affected by this in your estimation?
I sent out
Yeah.
some,
Yeah,
I
those
sent out
numbers.
some data.
So, can you
Of the-
summarize
Of the
that?
9,500 single families, I don't know, worst cases, maybe half would be,
In what part of town would that be typically? Like, we're not talking Westlands, right?
anything 30 and more, 30,000 square feet or more is definitely,
Yeah.
So
definitely
some of our larger
very light,
lots.
very
Would be
viable.
That's a-
impacted.
But that's assuming our current setbacks and restrictions hold.
Hold,
Right.
If the
exactly.
state has an exception
Where's the 5,000?
with that,
in here.
like
Hold on,
they
I'll get it.
did with our
I
development
was at the
agreement.
meeting, and I thought that it was still subject to all of our local zoning setbacks.
Well, it is,
But they have to be reasonable.
but it's the reasonable
Reasonable, we
requirement.
voted on them.
But
Not
so is our
necessarily.
developer agreement until they said it wasn't.
So, the other
The
question I
whole
have.
town voted on it, it's gotta be reasonable,
So setbacks is one thing.
in my mind,
Right.
right?
The current setbacks are very reasonable.
Okay,
If the
so
town were
then
to choose to
adopt
apply
that.
new setbacks because detached ADUs would be permitted at that point, then the change between existing setbacks and whatever the planning board recommends at town meeting to specifically regulate detached ADUs depending upon the zoning analysis, the size of the lot, the state could determine that those are unreasonable.
Yeah.
But Evan, they could also determine our current dimensions are unreasonable with the new law.
The new ones, I think, are like 10 feet. I mean, and again, they don't really apply directly to ADUs, they apply to detached structures, so like garages. If you have a 3-car garage or a 2-car
10 feet.
garage, in some zoning districts, it's a 10-foot setback.
But but the ADUs could be
So we have a
detached as
problem with
well.
that part of the law too then. but-
Yeah.
What about
What was it?
I guess I'm unclear also about, what about
language.
pre-existing non-conforming? So say I had a 3-car garage that was pre-existing, it's non-conforming, and I wanted to make it an ADU.
Under the state law, you'd likely be allowed to do that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many?
There are a
do you
few
think-
places, carriage barns and stuff that would
Yeah, I
fall
wonder how
within
many,
that.
yeah.
I think we should focus on, too, on asking the select board, if we work together with them, is to contact all the state reps.
Yes.
Because it bothers me that, especially that one state rep from a neighboring suburb that represents a piece of Chelmsford, did not consult with anyone outside their town. Just because Westford voted to up the square footage for an ADU, that's fine for Westford. The Westford solution might not fit for Chelmsford. And if you think about what Anita said, just think of that. Last year, Lowell, a very large city in the Commonwealth, had this same debate, and they did not feel it was right for them, and that's an urban area.
Yeah.
They fought it, yeah. No, you
Well-
got a good point. I did meet with that rep at the meeting, and I see where they're going with it. It's just the way they're going about it
Yeah.
is the issue.
Yeah, but from the select board the other night, talking with the attorney, town attorney, he thinks that this may be voted on by July 1.
It's being fast-tracked.
The town manager indicated today, I think he received a correspondence from a select board member, that the next hearing on this bill is Tuesday.
Yeah.
So it's
So it's a possibility they could vote on it Tuesday?
I don't know if it's the final
Is this a
vote or
public
just,
hearing? Can I
it is
go
a
to
public
this? I'll go
hearing.
with it. When is it?
The manager was not able to find any documentation on the state's website of the hearing, but I believe it was confirmed through a select board member that the next hearing is
Can-
this Tuesday.
Could Virginia clarify for us? She's in the back. Do you mind coming up and talking?
Virginia, are you interested in providing us with additional information about the timeline?
So, Virginia Timmons, 28 Lovett Lane. I'm the vice chair of the select board. This all happened shortly before your meeting started tonight. But we received communication from Representative Elliott that the Joint Committee for Capital Assets and Bonding is having their hearing on the House bonding bill, which includes the ADUs, on Tuesday from 1 to 5. And it looks like they're closing public comment at 5. Somebody mentioned the July timeframe. Under the normal timeframes, my understanding is that typically as bills go through the House Ways and Means, through the Ways and Means committees, it goes through the House in the May timeframe, through the Senate in the House in the April timeframe, Senate in the May timeframe, committee in the June timeframe, and that's kind of what gets you to the July mark when the bill passes. It sounds like they might be trying to accelerate the timeline for this bill and push it through all those House Ways and Means steps sooner rather than later. So I don't know any more details right now. Representative Elliott was going to try to get some clarification on the timelines for the House and Senate Ways and Means and whether they would be accepting public input. And he's going to get back to Manager Cohen tomorrow on that. We are just trying to figure out whether we need to accelerate writing of a letter to get into the Tuesday process with the
Can people,
Capital Assets and
this is a
Bonding
public
Committee.
comment, can we speak at the public comment?
I'm gonna go.
Yeah,
I'll go.
anybody can go.
I think it's
Yeah,
important that we
anybody-
show up, like,
right,
and I
and
think people need to.
There's also, I asked Representative Elliott if they would be doing that, taking comment virtually, and he's gonna check on that too. to see if there'll be a link or if you have to be there in person.
Were you paying attention to the meeting? Who was the lady that was an assistant to the governor from Salem, Mass? What was her name? Do you remember? In the
Lieutenant Governor?
Was it no, she was at our meeting. I don't think we had the lieutenant governor there.
At our meeting?
That thing we went to about this.
With Arciero?
Arciero.
Oh,
Do you remember? I guess I could figure that out.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
That was the NIMCOG Housing Strategy meeting.
Yeah. But there was a lady from Salem that was a proponent for this directly with the governor that did it in Salem.
That would.
But they did, but their version, you had to be, is the lieutenant governor? from-
She was the mayor of Salem.
Yeah, so that was the lady that was talking. But they left in that you had to be a homeowner, you had to be owner occupied, in her version. So she brings it to the state and then she changes it completely, even for her town, you know what I mean? What she already did at her town. So what made her change? That's my question to her.
I don't know, and I don't want to inappropriately get involved in your deliberations either, so
But yeah, I was just hoping,
Thank
so
you
it was
very
the
much.
lieutenant.
that's what I know right now in terms
Okay.
of the timeline.
Thank you so much for that
It's possible that we
clarification.
may try to do a emergency meeting on Monday to get a letter together for Tuesday, but
Okay.
we're still
So
waiting to
we
hear
should
back.
try and come up with a position, if we can, in the next,
Well, I think we've kind of stated it, we
10
just need
minutes.
to
So when
sum
I
it
go,
up.
can I say I'm with Chelmsford Planning Board or I can't?
what?
If I go to this meeting,
Yeah, as an individual.
call this
we
lady
certainly
out,
could.
because no one's called her
In
out
about
yet.
10 minutes, you'll be able to, when you guys finish your deliberations and take a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
first
in-
let's take a vote on what our position is. So, does anyone want to try and articulate our position for us?
I can.
Yeah, it's great.
So in general, in addition to being opposed to the general approach that the state is taking on this,
Fast dragon.
we are also opposed to some specific issues, aspects of the proposed law. The fact that I think that it is no longer needing to be attached is one concern. That it no longer needs to be owner occupied. Either dwelling needs to be owner occupied. And that the family aspect has been removed.
Sadly, I think it's a done deal, because every town in the state has the same reaction we're having.
Okay,
That
so
everybody.
I think that we might want to try and focus our attention on what aspect is most egregious to us.
All
And
three.
All three.
Because
I
you,
don't mind the family one, because I don't think that's gonna, I think that train left the station.
People
I
were
mean-
skirting that for years. For years, people were
Right,
skirting
and, you know,
that.
the definition of family is very fuzzy.
Here's my thing, again, if we look at what the letter that they wrote here, right? I mean, I don't know why we can't just copy something to what they've written. Like, I have an issue with the state mandating anything to us, quite
Yeah.
frankly, period. That's, as far as I'm concerned, yes, they can, right? But that's just, like, they're reaching, like, focus on state issues, focus on infrastructure, focus on getting.
Help us with our sewer
Right,
problem.
getting jobs here,
And
sewer,
then we can
right?
develop.
Then we'll talk about, you know, you coming into
that?
our purview of how we want our towns made. Like, I fundamentally have a problem with that, period. We have zoning, we can address, if we want to add additional ADUs, we can address it, we can address how we like it, how we want.
but we do need to address this specific
Yeah, so
legislation.
what, this letter that.
Okay, so we don't approve of the fast tracking. We think there should be much more opportunity for input from the communities and the stakeholders and the citizens. And we don't agree with the rescinding of the requirement for at least one of the units to be owner occupied. Because that's gonna be the thing that has the most impact in terms of
Yes.
precipitating
Scary.
development.
So you'll have two rentals on a property.
Yeah, and it'll be owned by BlackRock or somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Some because that's what's.
To me, those are the two main things, and if we could get them to make it be owner occupied, I think it would, and maybe request that there be better clarification about what reasonable requirements are, because it makes us uneasy that those stipulations are as yet unstipulated.
Yeah,
Like,
Then why doesn't the state come in here and zone, CB, then they're gonna come in and do CB, and then they'll do RV residential, single
they're
family.
specifically trying to fix housing, which they're not doing it the right way, but they are trying to address a specific problem.
I don't think they
And the
actually have a way
they're
to
doing
do it.
is incorrect.
Not consistent with modern capitalism. There is no way to do it.
They would fit,
Without-
right, there's a whole bunch
without-
of way to address it. You
Yeah.
can also stimulate companies going out to Worcester, up to Lowell, up to
Yeah, I was gonna say, it seems
Lawrence.
like a lot of-
That will fix
I can't believe
housing.
that.
Yeah, a
you
lot of
didn't-
politicians on Beacon Hill need to get in a car and go beyond 495, because the answer to this isn't to destroy the suburbs in the Merrimack Valley. There's plenty of land, plenty of trees, and economic opportunity
Yeah.
in Western
Worcester,
Mass.
Dead on.
In Central Mass.
Get a bus.
And they need it. Some of them need it pretty badly.
Okay, but what can we, what can we do that is like
Come down to State House with me.
I'll come with you.
that-
What
Let's
time's
do
this?
it,
We're going.
Patty.
concise and has some hope of having an impact?
Kick some
I liked all the
driving the bus?
things that
I'll drive the bus.
that you articulated about the
short
Yeah.
bus.
the home ownership and the
Feedback.
homeownership, the yeah.
Well, let's take those particular points, let's make sure that the select board is aware of them, which I'm quite sure they are, Virginia.
I would like to
And-
add the family component and the
Yeah.
detached component as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You're not
definitely would
happy with
detach.
No.
I don't want detached, right?
Because
like,
then
it's-
every
yeah.
garage
Oh,
is going to be turned into a
There's
rental.
other, it's not, people want an office too. So this is gonna serve a couple things, right? People are working from home. They can't work with the dog and the kid running around.
But an ADU is not an office.
But they'll use it as something like that. You know what I mean?
So, okay, so,
So,
This is a full apartment. The way the regulation is
no,
written.
I know, it's gonna have
a full
cooking and
apartment.
everything, but.
Yeah,
It'll be used in a bunch of different ways.
it'll
is
be
the way
used
I-
as a rental.
something like what Senator Kennedy wrote here, like it's vague enough. That just, it pretty much says like, we already have this.
Other towns are responding right now, guaranteed.
Right,
Inclusive of sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities.
That's not an office.
Right, that is not an office.
True, but
Yeah.
it could be used as a,
Self-contained housing unit.
like I think a simple
Separate
sentence that says we're, not in favor of this, period.
No,
Like-
Anita, they're going to ignore that. They need,
Not if they get enough of them from enough towns.
but they're not going to stop this.
but they may make a change. They may make a
Right, but
change.
we have to
You might
mention
not,
what we want.
you might
for
not want
changes.
to shoot for the sky, because they've already
Yeah.
thought about this, so maybe
should
just
do
the
the same
owner
process
occupied
as the
and focus on that.
Why focus on one thing? If there are multiple things wrong with it, give them the full list of what's wrong with it, and if we get one of them, great, but we should be,
The key is verbal testimony. The written testimony gets lost in.
It gets lost.
Yeah.
They'll hear.
It's effective advocacy, organized advocacy for revisions.
Okay, so we don't have a plan that we want to give to the select board?
I think you've articulated.
Well, we still are stuck on, are we going to list everything, or are we going to pick up what we think are the most important things?
Well, they may want to list all those anyway. They have their
At a
own
minimum,
opinion.
they're all general. Maybe you highlight one in particular,
I like to highlight the owner occupancy.
but I think you include them all.
yeah, I think we include them all and highlight,
A
Emphasize it
specific
somehow, I don't
emphasis on the owner occupancy feature needs to be required. It could be in the little one, I don't care.
Within the context of political compromise, if the municipalities are able to get their message across that requiring ownership is the top priority, well, maybe
I mean,
there's.
that's going to be the most detrimental, but the other things
Right.
are,
Gonna
Yeah.
hurt too.
yeah.
It's just not clear at this point if the state's acknowledging the opposition and looking for some political compromise. If they are, and most suburban communities prioritize ownership as
Yeah.
their compromise in exchange for allowing detached and doing away with family relationship, there may be a win-win or a solution.
I don't think we get there without listing them all.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think we do.
yeah, but it's gonna come
That's
down,
fair.
it's gonna come down to who's participating at those public hearings.
So Virginia, you're gonna will you let us know if this can be done virtually, if we can provide comments
They're gonna
virtually?
limit it till 5 o'clock, you said? There's a lot of communities involved.
Yeah, so when we find out, I can make sure that
Yeah.
it's shared with
Can you
this.
send it to us?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay. Are we done?
Okay, do we have any liaison reports that haven't already been given in another context?
Nope.
Okay, I'll
And the
take a
work plan
motion.
bumps off
before
to
we do-
another session.
Do we have
Ben, are
any?
you getting that to the select board?
I will send an email. Did you highlight a particular one?
Yes,
Yeah,
Ownership.
owner occupied.
Yep,
I'll list them
we'll
all.
list them all. That's fine.
No new business? I hope.
No new business.
I move to adjourn.
Do we have any agendas? Any agenda, not agendas,
Minutes.
minutes?
No, it said
No, I know
And,
Becky was
nothing
frantically
attached.
working on
click on it.
the 5-hour meeting one. But she did not make the deadline.
She has my sympathy.
Oh, my God.
I feel like before we
Awful.
Yeah.
That wasn't
I
bad.
go run screaming out the door.
convene in another iteration of this board, it's kind of late into the game, I guess, now, because the election's next week, but I really feel like we should need to make an effort about the outstanding minutes.
As you know, your tradition of the planning board minutes is more detailed than less detail. And your recent discussions have been very technical in nature. So
I get it.
those minutes take a long time.
But weren't you talking with your guys, we're gonna try and hire someone to help with that?
There was talk of that. That has not happened. The most recent talk has been exploring AI.
I was
Apparently-
just gonna
I was gonna
suggest
just
that.
say AI.
Yeah, so there is a,
Brain up what?
there's a company.
They gotta control us
Yeah,
anyway.
There's a company that's specializing in an AI program or system for municipalities. And the town has met with them and tested the system, but it's not, it's still beta, it's not ready to go
It's
yet.
gonna be an AI planning.
Well, can you give us an update on that, maybe?
So are we ever going to vote on the last motion?
I seconded it. I'll vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.